So we have a packed evening. We're going to start tonight with our budget workshop, which will give you an overview of kind of where we stand right now relative to the budget, and then some action steps between now and our next meeting. We're going to transition from that to Pittsford Pride, which is at 7 o'clock, which means we're going to have this room filled with awesome students and families celebrating amazing citizenship. Typically, those families are ready to leave after that and not stay for the next part of the meeting. So we're going to ask all of those people to leave, or we're going to welcome them to leave, which they will all graciously leave. Then we'll bring in the next group of people to attend our regular board meeting, which will start, my guess is probably around 7:30. And we have quite a bit on the agenda. So we have the Code of Conduct tonight, and we also have Principals Report tonight. I have our survey results tonight, and we have a lot of public comment submissions and public comments that we'll work through this evening too. So given all of that, we're starting about 4 minutes late because we had to feed the board in preparation for the long night. So we each had a slice of pizza, and we're ready to go with our budget workshop. So with that, I want to thank Darren Kenny, our Assistant Superintendent for Business, along with Leanne Reister, who is his assistant in putting together our presentation tonight. So Darren, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Sure, I could do a check, make sure we're good as far as being live right now. Okay.
Okay. So I can't believe we're here already. The year went by pretty quickly. Looking at the projections for the 2022-23 budget development, we usually start out this time of year looking at the property tax cap. Yes. It's on. I guess I have to basically eat it.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Sorry, Sean, you have to use it afterwards, so at least I'm wearing a mask. But then we're going to look at state aid, the governor's proposal. It's a little bit premature on that because some of the workshops and things that I attend to learn more about it, they start actually tomorrow, but I've been doing a lot of research into it. And then we're going to look at future meetings and what's next, so to speak. Starting off with the property tax levy, that's about 76% of our total budget support. Most school districts, especially to the west of us, they do the opposite. They're looking more at the state aid because it's a similar percentage for them. As you know, we've had the property tax cap since 2012. So the tax levy isn't what it used to be. In the good old days, you pretty much figured out what your budget was and what the tax levy needed to be in order to balance that budget. And then the board would discuss whether that was within the parameters of what they thought the community would support or not. Now the game is new. So looking real quickly, I already mentioned this a little bit, but looking at the county, both Monroe 2 and Monroe 1 districts, and we sorted them in order. So it goes all the way from, I'm going to round it off, 40% of support for the budget being tax levy in Brockport, all the way to us at 76% on the higher side, and it's about 54% on average. So it's easy to just kind of look at that number and go, oh, okay. But what that really means is for every dollar that we add or take away from the budget, that has about a 76-cent impact on the tax levy, obviously assuming there's no state aid that's associated directly to that dollar that's being changed. During these times of inflation like we have right now, it's extremely punitive for our district, for example, that relies very heavily and being capped or having that one of those factors being that 2% cap, as opposed to a school district perhaps that doesn't have as much of their support based on the tax levy. And to the other side of the coin, state aid is more impactful for those other districts. So you'll see some analysis on that in a few minutes. So moving on to the tax levy and the property tax cap formula, especially when it was new, a lot of people called it the 2% tax cap. The 2% is just one factor in many different factors within the formula. We'll see more of that in a few minutes. It very rarely works out to exactly 2%. A few years ago, our tax cap actually worked out to like 0.12%, the way the formula worked through. So there's three different parts to the tax levy, or key phrases. The tax levy limit, which is basically the formula without the exclusions, which in our case is, for the most part, the debt service and the building aid. The maximum allowable, when you add those exclusions back in, and then the proposed, what the board decides the tax levy could be. You don't have to go out at the tax levy cap. You could be below it. And as you know from a few years ago, we tried once going out above it. But that requires a 60% majority of people to vote for the budget, not just the simple majority. I'm not going to go through this slide. There's going to be several slides I'm not going to go through in great detail. I include them so that when it goes on the website, people have something to refer to. But I like to include this because it's from a third party. It's not from us. So Questar Boses explains the tax cap and the formula. So getting right down to it, as far as how it particularly pertains to us, you start out with the current year's tax levy, which is $109 million. You multiply it by what's called the tax base growth factor, and that's supplied to us in January from the comptroller's office. They look at each school district, and it's not based on revaluation of homes, et cetera. It's based on development. So ours is up a little bit. Last year, just to give you a comparison, it was about half that number, so we have a little bit more development than before. Pilots are payments in lieu of taxes. The prior year has to be added back in because when you think about it, those are properties that are removed from the tax roll. So for this calculation, it makes sense to put them back in. And then we have to subtract out last year's exclusions, which is the debt service minus building aid is the bulk of it. Also the BOCES capital project minus the associated aid. The reason behind that is the voters have already voted on those things, so they shouldn't have to vote on them again. So because it was an exclusion that increased the tax levy last year, when you're doing the formula, you have to take the prior years and back it out. So we have the adjusted base of 104 million. Then there's where we have the 2%, so to speak. And the law says that it's a maximum of the lesser of 2% or CPI. So when I mentioned that when we had a real low tax cap a few years ago, that's when CPI was, if I remember correctly, about 1%, 0.9, something like that. When you look at, for the last 12 months, the comptroller says CPI has been 4.7%, but the maximum we can do is 2%. So there's the start of what I talked about as far as the challenge when your tax-based growth is capped. Then we have to do our estimated pilots or payments in lieu of taxes for next year, and they're a little bit of an increase. That has to be backed out. And we're down to $106.3 million. And then we add in what our tax, our exclusions are for next year, and they're up a little bit, about $32,000, so $5.5 million. So our tax cap, if you will, is $111,869,613 is the way it calculates as of today. That's a 2.53% increase, and about $2.7 million of additional revenue that would generate if we went out at the cap. So again, the exclusion amount is the net of the debt and the capital expenses. This can fluctuate from year to year. Our debt service schedule fluctuates, the payments, as well as the state aid fluctuates because they do it based on what they call assumed amortization because the state basically financed our capital project in order to be able to pay the aid on it. Kind of a benchmark that I thought was interesting. When I started working here, it was during the $106 million capital project. And I remember thinking, I wonder if I'll still be here when one of these is paid off. In 2013, we refinanced the balance because the state changed the formulas. We wanted to stay ahead of the building aid decreasing. So next year, we'll make our final payment of about $5.1 million on the $35.5 million bond for the capital project. So kind of an interesting time I thought to bring up because soon we're going to be talking to you about the building condition survey and scope for a new project and the fact that Calkins Road is not the brand new school anymore. And we're also already starting to pay off the debt on it. I want to bring to your attention too that the school buses, as you know, we pay for them from the capital reserve, the bus purchase reserve. So it's basically a savings account that we pull money out to buy the buses. That actually decreases our exclusion, if you will, because the aid doesn't have an offsetting expense because we're not taking out debt to buy the buses. But we don't do that because we don't want to incur the interest expense and make payments on those buses for the next 5 to 10 years. So the law says that we need to submit this to the comptroller online by March 1st, and we are on track to definitely do that. So some nuances for the state aid or the governor's proposal. It's important to understand where the governor gets her numbers. In June 30th, we close out our year of the prior year. We spend this summer, much of the summer, closing out the books and filing reports with the state. January 15th, the governor's office and director of budget uses that information to develop the governor's proposed budget. From roughly January 15th through April 1st, when the state is legally supposed to have a state budget, the legislature and the governor and various forces negotiate and do things to try to impact that budget. When I started in this business, it was very unusual to have a state budget by April 1st. I remember one year went to as late as the end of September, and we didn't know what our state aid was going to be. Made it a real challenge to go out and vote when you had no idea what your state aid was going to be. Then April through May, that's where basically our work kicks in as far as meeting the legal deadlines to be able to conduct the hearing and the vote. So the governor usually presents the worst case scenario, if you will, and everybody negotiates to try to get it increased. Their fight for their constituents. It's been a long-standing, for decades, practice called the shares agreement, where basically they look at the state aid and they make sure that certain percentages of that total state aid package goes downstate, New York City, Western New York, et cetera. This year, the governor basically, came out with the best case scenario. And I think the reason being is because she's committed to addressing the foundation aid debacle, as well as having some federal funds that she can use on some one-shot deals. So getting into the proposal, high-level look at it. The governor proposes a $216.3 billion New York State spending plan, which is about a 2% increase. But we'll get to an interesting twist on that in a minute. The plan is balanced through 2027, so that's the first time I've seen that proposed when the budget comes out. Then it gets interesting because they project, or they've had for the last 2 years and projecting for next year, stronger tax revenues from sales tax and the online taxes. They're increasing the budget by another $22.2 billion. So really the spending plan is up $3.1 billion. So it's a little bit of a change there. One thing I found interesting was part of governor's plan is to increase the state's reserves to 15% of operating funds to create a rainy day fund for things like 9/11 and a pandemic. So kind of a quiz for the board. What is our maximum we can set aside for rainy day? Yep, 4%. So it'd be interesting to see if schools get to do something similar in the future or not. Don't hold your breath. Non-recurring initiatives, you'll see a lot of them here, and they're pretty expensive, but you can see the area where they're going. You're going to see a lot of targeted things throughout this executive budget. Governor Hochul's predecessor generally was big on trying, if you recall, consolidate things and decrease them as he did it. This governor is actually looking at certain specific areas and trying to channel money into those areas. So digging down into schools specifically, $31 billion of that $216 million plan is for schools. That's a $2.1 billion or 7.1% increase. That's mostly due to trying to address the foundation aid formula. So speaking of foundation aid, for those who may not remember, and those who've heard it many times, I apologize, but in 2006-07, there was a downstate lawsuit saying that the the general operating aid and the school state aid formulas were not constitutional because basically they weren't following formulas. Everything was a behind the doors negotiation. and the Supreme Court ruled or agreed with that. So then Governor Spitzer at the time came up with what was called foundation aid, which was for a sound basic education, and the intent was for schools to know 4 years in advance what their state aid was going to be, and they could plan on that, and it would be based on formula, and it would increase over the years, assuming your enrollment was stable. And you'll see in a moment that never really materialized. Governor Hochul's 2022-23 proposal is the second year of trying to address that problem, especially for school districts like us that are drastically underfunded. There's schools out there that are receiving 100 to 120% of what they should be getting per the foundation aid formula. We've been as low as 56% in recent years. So her formula is to try to get everybody up to that standard over a 3-year period. And for those that are already there or close to it, they get a maximum of 3%. So I just want to give you a quick synopsis of where we've been with aid over the years. The blue being what the formula of foundation aid should be, and the red being what we actually received. Where you see the red take a dip there in the early years, that was, if you recall, the deficit reduction assessment, which was during the Spitzer and Patterson years. And then you go a little more to the right and you see the blue coming down. That was the wonderful gap elimination adjustment. So it was kind of tricky. Lower the amount of foundation aid the law says you should get, and therefore the gap got smaller to the red bars. Moving over to the right, the gap elimination adjustment was taken away a few years ago. And then if you look at the last 2 years with the increases, that's a combination, excuse me, of trying to correct the problem or fully fund foundation aid, as well as the state is finally recognizing that we have full day K and weighting our students properly. Okay? So you'll see that in the red that our aid has also gone up in the last 2 years. Looking at it from a cumulative perspective, you can see the trajectory over the years. So it's kind of a misnomer to use the phrase fully funded. I compare it to picture you're a landlord and you charge $500 a month rent, and your tenant is not paying the rent, and then they come to you and say, well, this month I'll pay a third of it, and next month I'll pay another third, and the month after that I'll be fully funded. Well, what about the previous 6 months when you didn't make any payments? So in our case, we're owed $101 million. That's what over the years, over the 15 years, that difference has come. I don't think we'll ever see that money, don't get me wrong, but I would say I would call it making full payments of state aid, but not fully funded. So looking at the governor's run and putting in a format that makes a little more sense compared to what you see that comes from the Microsoft DOS days. First column is what we actually have for the aid for this year, then right straight from the governor's run, and then we make adjustments based on things that we know. For example, maybe back in July or August, the state made assumptions about a special needs student and the cost, and we know that student's not with us anymore, so we won't get that aid, et cetera. So you can see a pretty big increase there in the foundation aid from 11.2 to $15.1 million, 3.9 million increase, or 34.9%. Pretty substantial, but that also means that gives you an indication of how far underfunded we were. Full day K, that's been fully implemented. Universal pre-K, we do not have a program, so we do not get those funds. BOCES, looking at our trajectory of what we're doing so far this year, we think that needs to be reduced a little bit from an aid standpoint. High excess cost, that's for special needs. We have a student that's going to one of the state schools. I want to respect their privacy, but when that happens, they actually reduce the aid, so that's why we've made that adjustment. And moving down through the other forms of aid, transportation, as you know, we have a shortage of bus drivers, so we're not spending as much in salaries. So what the state does, they assume we're going to spend every penny of our budget. We know for a fact we're not, because we have the shortage of drivers, so we've adjusted the aid for that. So the adjusted aid is $27.4 million. We're projecting a $3.1 million increase in aid, total aid, or 12.8%. I'm not going to go through all of these. I might just hit a few specific ones, but as I said, the governor's proposal has a lot of interesting targeted areas, like this $100 million for learning and mental health grants. But quite often what you'll see is the very last line, that criteria are under development by the Commissioner of Education or some other entity within the state, so we don't know for sure will qualify. Most of them are leaning towards high needs districts, low performing districts, high minority content, et cetera. As we heard at the last board meeting, Governor Hochul is being pretty aggressive with the electric buses, proposing that by 2027, all buses that school districts purchase will be EV buses, and by 2035, all buses on the streets will be EV buses. That's a pretty high bar to set, considering the lack of infrastructure throughout the state for electric buses, as well as manufacturers being able to produce what is required. Teacher pipeline and various other things to try to improve recruiting and address the shortage of teachers, including the income waiver for retired teachers and administrators to be able to work without having a reduction to their retirement. Also proposing a change in the conflicts of interest, basically making school boards and municipality officers subject to the same criteria as the state. So basically anybody living in your house or sharing the same grandparent is subject to the same financial disclosure. So one thing I found interesting was with all this stuff within the governor's budget trying to improve recruiting of teachers and administrators, et cetera, there was nothing in there for bus drivers, and that seems to be the area not just for Pittsford but throughout the state, where if you can't get the kids to school, the teachers don't have as much to work with. This one I find interesting, Rochester City School District and BOCES. The Rochester City School District can get health-related services from BOCES 1 or 2 at the same price as the component districts pay. As you all know, we are a part of BOCES, so we pay administrative and capital and some other expenses, and Rochester City School District is not a part of that BOCES and doesn't have to pay those expenses. So that was part of the reason why in the past they paid a different tuition rate, if you were, or service rate. The state is making some adjustments to non-public schools because of mandates that they're putting on them. I think one of the things I'm going to hear tomorrow in this seminar is that we're not seeing the same type of thing for public schools as far as new mandates. Would they come down? Here's funding for that mandate. Doesn't really pertain to us but immediately, but it might be fun to see what's going to happen. We are not in the child nutrition program. However, there's some substantial changes. They are moving the oversight of the state's national nutrition program from New York State Education Department to the Department of Agriculture. So that could have some interesting implications. So putting it all together, on the left-hand side or in the red, this is the area that where we are. Foundation aid phase-in, property tax cap, as previously said, $2.7 million increase there. And then the adjusted proposal for state aid, about $3.1 million. So we have almost $5.9 million worth of new revenue potential coming in to support the budget. And to put that in perspective to the size of our budget, we're about 4% that represents on our current picture. If we were fully funded and we were one of those districts that has the 3% maximum change in foundation aid, the top number stays the same, but we would actually have a reduction of almost $450,000 in state aid because we would only get $336,000 increase in foundation aid as opposed to $3.9 million. So down to 1.6%. And that would definitely put us in a deficit situation that we'd have to try to find our way out of. So over the coming weeks, we're going to continue to work with stakeholders. And you're going to hear from those stakeholders in the next couple of workshops. Staffing and sectioning and enrollment projections, and that tends to be, goes like this, you know, one thing moves and then something else moves and you keep going back and forth. BOCES, we've met with BOCES, and they are updating their budgets based on preliminary service requests from districts. State aid, we'll see what comes out of Albany over the next few weeks. Tax cap, as I mentioned, we were going to be submitting that. I don't anticipate a substantial change to that unless there's a substantial change to the data that we've received. We'll be doing work with the district planning team, and we'll continue to do advocacy, just like on Saturday, and monitor the federal progress. And then the upcoming meetings, we have 2 more budget work sessions, one on March 1st, and the other one on March 15th. The final meeting in March we have as a backup date if we need to, depending on what's going on with the state budget. A few meetings with the district planning team. April 5th is the planned budget adoption, but we can do April 25th if we absolutely need to, let's say if the state budget is late or something like that.
So Darren, if I could just highlight, some of those dates are not the same dates that are on our district calendar, and we amended those, I think, 2 board meetings ago.
Yep.
So for the community to look at those, to understand that these are the dates we're following at this point.
So our hearing is on May 10th, and the vote is on May 17th, the legal date, the 3rd Tuesday of the month. Any questions?
Thank you, Darren. Just a quick question. On slide 12, there's a reference to the governor's leading off with the best-case scenario and using federal stimulus funds now and in the future. Is that similar to our applying reserve funds to help cover operational? I mean, you refer to a fiscal cliff.
Right.
Is that kind of can we draw that analogy? Or?
Sure. Yeah, it's very similar, but I also want to say it's dissimilar from her predecessor, because what he would do is he would decrease the aid and then plug it with the federal money.
Right.
So that means when the money went away, your foundation aid or whatever aid instantly dropped. She's using it more to enhance the aid to meet the demand. My question is, what happens when that's not there?
Right.
But at least hopefully it doesn't take us backwards.
Good. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
One quick question, Darren. You had mentioned on the full day K, they adjusted the foundation aid to where they're counting our kindergartners as full students at this point?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
And to put that in perspective, that was almost $900,000 per year. What's that? Yep.
So if I could just reset, some people came in late. Tonight we're going to have at 7 o'clock students coming in for Pittsford Pride, and they're going to bring their families in. And so we're going to ask for them to take precedence in here while we have another room available. Then we'll adjourn from Pittsford Pride, and people can come back in this room for a regular session. I will remind people that we do have a mask mandate. Here tonight, what you'll hear from all of us with any questions or comments is a full sense of transparency where we stand. We do have people that I'm aware of that are here that are immunocompromised right now. We are under a mandate. So those of you that will not wear a mask, what we will do is we'll take a recess. We'll then come back. And if people are still not in masks, then what we'll do is go remote. At this point, I'm going to ask everyone that's here to put on a mask. However, I would also share with you that between 7 and 7:30, we're really not going to be together much until after Pittsford Pride. So down the hall to the right, there is a room where you can watch the Pittsford Pride, and then after Pittsford Pride, you can come back here. The other thing I will share with those not wearing a mask right now is that I get where you're coming from. I think we all get where you're coming from. And we're in a real weird spot right now, and we're hoping to get to a really good point where we can get to mask optional. But until that point, we're under a mandate. We need to respect one another. We need to have a respectful board meeting. And that's what my hope is for this evening. If we can't do that, then we'll just shut it down and we'll go remote, and then we'll continue remotely. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Darren. Oh, we still have Sean. And now, Human Resources.
Thank you. So I'd like to start just with our areas of support. So you can see in some way, shape, or form, our office actually touches.
Sean, can you get that microphone right in there? Thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. In some way, shape, or form, our office does touch the 5,500 students and approximately 1,100 staff that we have. So personnel issues and matters, sectioning and staffing, labor relations, contracts.
Sean, if we could just pause, we're going to have to, I'd like to make a motion to go into recess.
So moved.
Second. Questions, discussion? Okay. Recess.
Okay. Is the volume okay? Everyone can hear me? Okay,
Yes.
great. So again, just the areas of support and service and how our office does in some way impact the 5,500 students and approximately 1,100 staff that we have. And you can just see some information there. So just a little bit about what we're looking at from a budgetary standpoint for human resources for our particular department. Most of our budget is in salaries for administrative staff, for 2 administrative staff as well as secretarial. We also have the first line item, teacher fellows. That's a newer program, and we get aid back on that, about 80% of the money back on that, so it's a good investment. The teacher fellows program is actually a collaboration with colleges where we have people who work for the district, but they're also simultaneously, they are students seeking their teaching credentials. So they're basically building subs that we have on a regular basis. We have 5 this spring, and it's been a really nice value added. So we started that last year in the fall, took a break in the spring, and then we've brought it back for the full year. So it's a great program. And just some of the other areas in the budget as well. So from year to year, we're looking at about a 4% increase there. And looking at current contracts, currently this year we just have one contract that's going to be expiring, and that's our bus driver and attendants. That expires in June, so we're already in the process of working through that. And then next year is a rather large year where we have our teachers, we have food service, maintenance, custodial, mechanics, as well as our office professionals. We'll be looking at those contracts. As we look at the planning process through HR, we accomplish that through balancing the needs to keep the quality programs and structures in place, being fiscally responsible, and then maintaining positive relationships with our employees. It's very important to us. Staffing challenges. This is a pretty significant area, and there's a term, they call it the Great Resignation or the Big Quit. Some of those terms are out there, but just staffing challenges that a lot of school districts, and it's not just New York, it's not just Pittsford, it's really national. We have on one end people who pre-pandemic were maybe 5-7 years or a little more in terms of thinking about retirement, and ended up exiting the workforce much sooner. So we see that anomaly. And then on the other end, we have people, there's more competition for entry-level workers. So, think about some of our custodial or even clerical or other positions in food services, and then you can go almost anywhere and see help wanted signs. So there's greater competition there. We're also seeing more interest from potential employees, the interest in the remote work, and that's just something because we are an in-person institution. We rely on physical locations, so it's really harder to compete with that. Also, minimum wage has increased, so that causes a little bit of issue with things like compression, where you're trying to bring people in at a competitive rate without pushing past where people that are already in the organization. So those are some challenges, as well as civil service, which The civil service law is somewhat archaic and restrictive, so that makes it a little challenging in hiring as well. So what we've tried to do with our recruitment efforts, advertising, and I'd like to thank Nancy and her office because she was heavily involved with advertising, getting blasts out quickly and on a regular basis on Facebook and Twitter, as well as the homepage. So if you visited the homepage, this banner is right there, and it's clickable. It brings you right to our HR page so people can access the information much easier. Online applications have been fantastic, where people would mail in through the snail mail. Now they can fill out fillable forms online and send that to us, and we get those quickly. We're able to turn those around for certain positions. It's extremely helpful. Cold calls, so that's people who call us up and ask if they can sub in the district. They may not know anyone, they might be new to the area, so where they would have been diverted to the buildings to get a principal recommendation, Elizabeth Carpenter or I will call, we'll just have a conversation with them and then make the recommendation. So again, trying to streamline the process. Looking at compensation and being more competitive with salaries, so the increase we did for the bus drivers, as well as a review of special salaries that we're going to be doing tonight. And we had our job fair, had over 30 people in attendance with interest across all areas. Elizabeth Carpenter did a great job of creating informational sheets, so when people came in, they could see what are the benefits of this position compared to this position. That was very helpful. And I talked about our Teacher Immersion Fellows program. That's been a really nice addition. Again, it's not just one thing that we're trying to do, it's a number of things to try to help. And thanks to Darren and Leanne in the business office for streamlining the paperwork. That was one barrier that they were able to really assist with, so that way we're getting those fellows paid and getting the reimbursement back. Then hiring. So at the halfway point of this year, we've hired more teachers than the last 2 full school years. You see similar trends for SRPs, our school-related professionals, clerical, custodial, and food service workers. So typically, most of our hiring is done in the summer, spring, and summer, and then there's a little bit of a break. You might get a few people that either resign for different reasons, and then we're hiring. But we've been as busy throughout the fall and winter as we were in the summer. So it's a constant turnover, and we're just trying to keep up. And then these numbers would include both full-time and part-time positions. And our substitute recruitment efforts, just some data there. So throughout the summer, as of September 1st, we brought in 24 paraprofessional substitutes and 40 teacher substitutes. And then from that point to January 1st, we added an additional 12 paras and 24 teacher subs. So a lot of this is handled at the front desk. Carol Von Berg she's been fantastic in following up with people. We currently have the numbers here pending, and Carol's great about following up. The paperwork could be pending because we're waiting on fingerprint information coming back, or the person may be on vacation, or the person might be back at school, so we're just waiting for them to come back and complete the paperwork. And then when we get into the sectioning part, this is where it gets interesting, and each year we're always looking at numbers to make sure that we are fulfilling our contractual obligations. But at the elementary level, as we look at the data and the wonderful data from Jeff and the data team, looking at those forecasting numbers ahead, currently we're planning for next year for 2 additional sections. Now, we had a bit of an interesting scenario in the summer. We do a final sectioning in late July. And typically we have what we call bubble sections, and those are sections where 1 or 2 students could tip the balance into adding a section. And if we have, say, 5 or 6 of those bubble sections, maybe 1 or 2 will actually happen. Well, this past year we had 8 bubble sections, and all 8 of those sections ended up breaking, so we needed to hire 8 additional staff in the summer, which is very unusual. It's an anomaly. So again, 2 additional sections in addition to the 8 that we added in the summer, and then we're monitoring 6 bubble sections right now going into the spring. Middle school is probably the easiest just because of how they're structured. So we're really looking at middle school being staff neutral next year. And then high school, again, it's interesting the learning that you get. There's 19 to 20,000 high school requests through classes at both high schools, which is just incredible. I don't know how they handle that scale. But working with the secondary principals, they're fantastic. So they really understand that we try our very best to be staff neutral and to make sure that if we're adding a section or something here, we're looking at numbers in other areas and making decisions based on that. So it's really being very thoughtful and planful in that while still trying to maintain program quality. And then just the number of considerations that we balance in human resources to try to make sure that the kids have what they need and our teachers have what they need. So, any questions?
I just have a quick question, Sean. In terms of the fellows, I know the program's been incredible, but how successful are we at recruiting some of our fellows into the district?
It's a little early because we had the program last year in the fall, and then we didn't have the spring, and then we picked it back up. So I think it's a little too early to tell. We do have, I know there's one employee, though, that was at Jefferson Road that we had as a fellow last year, and he ended up continuing with us, and now he works, he's a paraprofessional, actually, at Jefferson Road. So the relationships that people have and the connections that they have, I always say it's like you're interviewing every day. So it's a wonderful program, and it's a really great support. It's consistent help that you can count on almost day to day in many cases. So it's been a big benefit.
So I think it's important for the board to just recall the connection between our January enrollment projections along with our budget projections as it relates to human resources, as that's the biggest part of that's a huge part of our budget is obviously the staffing for our schools. And so taking the enrollment projections that Jeff and the data team provided us with, and then looking at them by grade level, by school, and what's projected, we're able to take a look at what staffing would yield, hopefully, a half a year in advance. So as we build our budget, we're looking at the elementary level growing in 2 sections, in middle school stopping at a neutral point, and high school as a neutral point. And again, going from last year to this year was an anomaly where we had many sections where 1 or 2 kids could bump another section, and that yielded a substantial amount of staff at the elementary level, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing because it also provided us that transition to lower class sizes at the elementary level this year during a year where space was important for people. Any other questions for Sean? Okay, so if our audience doesn't mind, we do have a room down the hall and to the right. It's our spillover room, if you will. We're going to bring in our students that are getting Pittsford Pride Awards along with their families. And then really, it normally takes about 32 minutes, 33 tops. So we'll stop down there and let you know when that's over. We're going to take like a 5-minute recess in between. We'll bring people back in over here for our regular board meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Good evening. Good evening. One more time. Good evening. Hello. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Education meeting. If we could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have an approval of the agenda, please?
Second.
Thank you. Any edits? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. This is one of our favorite evenings because we're able to celebrate some really special students. So I welcome all of you that are here in the boardroom this evening. We can't wait to hear about all of our recipients tonight. So Superintendent Pirro?
Wow, what an amazing room full of great students and families. So thank you for being here tonight. I want to start out by welcoming you to our Pittsford Pride celebration, and like to emphasize my gratitude to the principals, the nominating staff, family, friends, special guests for being here, and most importantly, I want to thank our students who are the recipients tonight for going out of their way to make our world a better place. And that's why you're here tonight, is because of your citizenship, your character, your drive to make our Pittsford schools as safe and as welcoming as possible. And you're all leaders that are here and being nominated tonight, and that's amazing. We have close to 6,000 students in our district, and of 6,000 students, we recognize 27, which is pretty amazing. So math students, can you give me a percentage, please? Anyone? What is? Anyone? All right, it's a real small percent. And so it's a real special thing that you're nominated tonight for this. And we want to honor you. Tonight's ceremony will also be shared on our website, and it will also be on our YouTube channel. So we want you to be able to go back and review it and cherish it, because we cherish you and all that you do for our district. So here's how this has come to evolve. Our districts, or our buildings, are each tasked with finding students. Literally, all staff look long and far and hard and try to find the students that they feel exemplify citizenship. And then we ask our staff members to write down or to be able to share why this student should be nominated or recognized. And each building has a building committee that will then look at those that are nominated and make that very tough decision about who should be here tonight. Now, beyond tonight's recognitions, students will also be recognized in different ways in their buildings. It can range, and it does range, from having their recognition from tonight being on a bulletin board in the school, to being recognized through morning announcements, to having your name on a plaque, or working with your principal and a special privilege or gift that can range from free time to a parking pass to spirit wear to being a class helper to being a speaker to other classes. So we have a lot. We also have possibilities of lunches and well, I probably shouldn't, ice cream and those things we shouldn't have in school. So we want to shower you with gifts. There's a lot happening here. And then just as a aside, and your guardians are aware of this. After tonight, they're all going to take you out for something really special. High school students, you will receive a car from your parents or your guardians. Middle schoolers, you're going to the mall. Elementary parents, you have it easy. You're just ice cream and candy, and you're good tonight. So we want to make sure that everyone's really feeling celebrated, because it is a celebratory event. There's a lot of there's a lot of stuff happening in our world. There's a lot of stuff happening in our district that we can't control necessarily. But the students that are here tonight have made it their job to do what they can to control the temperature and the environment by which they live. So the 9 students that are here tonight with us and your families, I can't stress enough, in times that are tough, how inspirational each of you are, not to those only that are here, but how inspirational you are to your principals, to your teachers, and to your peers, and I'm sure to your families. So hats off to all of you. So just to talk you through the process a little bit tonight, we're going to call each student one by one. We're going to ask you to stand when we call your name. And then we're going to have our board president read the first three. So you're going to stand. We're going to read amazing things about you. We're going to give you a golf clap. You're going to sit down. Then we're going to do the next. Then we're going to do that for three. And then Vice President Mr. Rusty is going to come up, and we're going to do three more. And then I'm going to close it with the final three. And when we're all done, we're going to ask the students to come up, grab their plaque and their letter, and they're going to stand behind the board, and we're going to take pictures. And you're welcome to take as many pictures as you'd like. Then when we're all done with that, tonight's a little bit of an anomaly. We have a super busy board schedule. Unless you really want to stay, we're going to ask you to move that way. And then we're going to bring in people that are in a waiting room over there to come in for our regular board meeting, and we're going to go from there. Does that sound good? Okay. So with that, I'd like to introduce our board president, Amy Thomas.
I'm going to try to face this way so I can see the audience, but I have the pleasure of announcing the first recipient this evening, who is Mia Adler. Mia, if you could please stand. Hi, Mia. Mia is a 12th grader at Sutherland High School, and she was nominated by administrators and counselors. It is with great pleasure that the Sutherland High School administrator and counselor team nominates Mia Adler for Pittsford Pride recognition. Mia is a very smart, creative, and thoughtful member of the Sutherland community who possesses all the characteristics of a good citizen and outstanding person. Mia is motivated and curious. She challenges herself and explores new things. She makes decisions based on her personal experiences and does not adhere to predefined paths. She relies on being present and engaging, which contributes significantly to her academic success. She has an internal drive and desire to seek knowledge, and her teachers describe her as an outstanding student who is talented, thoughtful, self-disciplined, and one who demonstrates integrity. Mia is a humble leader. During her sophomore year, she was selected to represent Sutherland High School at the Hugh O'Brien Youth Leadership Conference. She eagerly learned leadership skills that she applies to her work within the community and beyond. She has served 4 years on student council in a variety of roles, including executive president, this is very impressive, by the way, executive president, secretary, class president, and class treasurer. I don't know how you do all that. She is also the Secretary General for the Rochester Model United Nations Conference. Moreover, Mia is a team player, ensures that everyone has a voice, is approachable and welcoming, and people are comfortable sharing their thoughts and opinions with her. Mia appreciates diversity and has a unique understanding of the interconnectedness of people throughout the world. In addition to her local efforts, she's engaged in active research at the University of Rochester, tracing the history of racism through the medical archives, and has volunteered as far away as Indonesian Borneo, where she worked on both human and environmental health projects. Mia's outlook on life, strong work ethic, genuine care for others, and healthy perspective make her an excellent contributor to her community and our community. I'm just adding that. It is without question that she will continue to have a profound impact on those around her. Congratulations, Mia. Do you have any plans for next year?
Funny you asked that. I'm waiting to hear back from college.
Okay, let us know. My next recipient is Omer Ahmed. Omer? Hi, Omer. Omer is in 6th grade at Barker Road Middle School, and he was nominated by Kristen Dolan. When we think of citizenship in our schools, we think about students who make our school a better place. This embodies Omer Ahmed. Omer comes to school each day ready to conquer his work, but more importantly, ready to conduct himself as a model citizen of Barker Road. Omer has a quiet approach to life and to school, which allows for everyone around him to feel welcome and safe. As a student, Omer rises to each challenge with a positive attitude, regardless of what's placed in front of him. He is a quiet advocate for himself and his peers. Omer makes other students feel welcomed and valued as members of his classes and of our school community. In class, whomever Omer is paired to work with is given an opportunity to experience Omer's kindness and collaborative nature. He's compassionate, thoughtful, and approachable in his manner, and connects positively with peers and adults alike. Omer is a valued member of the Barker Road Inclusivity Council. As a 6th grader on a multi-grade council, he lends thoughtful insight and contributions. Omer was born in Sudan and often shares about his Sudanese culture and connections with his family that is still there. Additionally, he frequently expresses great pride in his dad, who became a United States Army soldier upon arrival to the States. Omer speaks of his dad's multiple deployments and his consideration of following in his footsteps. Omer demonstrates each of Barker Road's core principles on a daily basis. His behavior and composed demeanor allows him to serve as a role model for everyone in our building. Omer encompasses the true meaning of citizenship and truly makes Barker Road a better place. Congratulations, Omer. And my third recipient is John Dean. John, you're right here. Hi. Hi. Well, this is nice. Do you want to just have a conversation? I heard you were in the play.
I was, yes.
Well, I'm impressed because I've heard so many positive things. So, thank you. John, my friend next to me, is in 8th grade and at Calkins Road Middle School, and he was nominated by the Purple Team, all of his teachers, counselor, and administrator. John Dean is an amazing person and definitely deserves this Pittsford Pride Award. Whether it's going out of his way to say hello to everyone in the hallway, or asking how your day is in class, or just making your class better by being a positive, cheerful presence, John Dean makes Calkins Road Middle School a better place to be. We feel the best way to capture John's impact is through the voices of those that work with him each and every day. In PE class, he always has ideas of making PE class innovative, fresh, and motivates others by sharing his positive aura. You look surprised. Are you surprised by that?
Not my favorite subject.
John is an extremely talented individual in theater, but his true talent is being an outstanding student, friend, and person. John is a true delight to teach. He's positive in class, mature, kind, happy, and spirited. He excels at everything that he does in my class and is well liked by the students. He takes the time to ask how my day is going, thanks me at the end of each lesson, and always has a kind word to say about a classmate. Academically, he's a rock star as well. John is an awesome web leader. We can always count on him to participate in all of our activities and go out of his way to help others. His upbeat personality is a welcomed part of our meetings. John not only serves as a role model to 6th graders, but a model to his peers as well. John is a positive and inclusive voice in class and a role model for his peers to emulate. He's a charismatic presence that encourages all to do their best and be their best selves. John's shining and exuberant school spirit is only matched by his wardrobe. You look dapper this evening. I love your shoes. John is always upbeat with a ready smile. He always asks how my day is as he enters the room, and he exits with a personable salutation. John is supportive of his fellow classmates. He'll go out of his way to improve someone's day. As a member of the principal's cabinet, John brings an energy to the group that's infectious. He ensures all voices are heard in discussions and truly wants to be a part of making Calkins Road a welcoming place for all. We're so proud of John, and we're honored to work with him. He's such a shining example of what Pittsford Pride is about and continues to shine every single day. Congratulations. And now I have the pleasure of introducing the Vice President, Mr. Aresti.
Thank you. It's always an inspirational night to hear about all these wonderful students. The first one I'll be introducing tonight is Will Fickling. Where are you? Hi, Will. How are you? Good. Welcome. So you were nominated by Miss Angie Carpin, third grade teacher at Menden Center. So let's hear about you. She says, it's my utmost pleasure to nominate Will Fickling for the Pittsford Pride Citizenship Award. Will is the epitome of kindness and treats everyone he encounters with empathy and respect. To see him interact with others, one might think he is much older than a third grader. He maintains eye contact, listens to understand, and responds in thoughtful ways. Will values the contributions of his classmates. His peers leave conversations with him feeling better about themselves. During class discussions, Will is a deep thinker. Will considers ideas and asks thoughtful questions that extend our learning. Not only does he ask the right questions, he listens to the answers and readily applies new information to his already vast prior knowledge. Motivation is never an issue for Will, and his curiosity and love of learning has been contagious for everyone. No matter the topic, Will is genuinely interested in learning more. For instance, at home, Will's dad is teaching him about physics. In class, Will then takes complex ideas from physics and applies them to what we are learning in a way other third graders can understand. He is humble and modest about his knowledge, but leaves us inspired every time he speaks. Will's patience knows no end. He is a perfect partner to have in class and is a productive group member. Will is inclusive of everyone and goes above and beyond to make others feel special. He can be counted on to protect the feelings of his peers and to be his best self in every situation. This applies not only to our classroom, but also to special area classes during recess and in the cafeteria. Other students benefit from Will's positive energy and caring ways, and we are all better for knowing him. Children's author Roald Dahl says, if you have good thoughts, they will shine out of you like sunbeams, and you will always look lovely. This is Will, a way of bright light, bringing happiness and positivity to those around him. He is genuine and authentic, and makes a difference in the lives of others. We thank him for making our school a better place. Congratulations, Will. My second student this evening is Roman Irazari. Apologize for that. Where are you? There you are. Hi, how are you tonight? Good. Outstanding. He was nominated by Miss Sanford at Jefferson Road. And she says, it's my pleasure to nominate Roman for the Pittsford Pride Award. Roman demonstrates many characteristics that make him a wonderful role model. Roman is a student who works incredibly hard throughout his entire school day. When things are challenging for him, he perseveres and never gives up. Roman has really taken the growth mindset to the depth of his heart. Roman is quick to say, I don't have this yet, but I will. And he means it. If an adult asks him to persevere on a task that is difficult, he always will. Roman tries his best and encourages others to do so as well. Roman is always willing to help his peers in any way he can. He is kind, caring, and a great friend to his classmates. An example of his selfless acts of kindness Roman displays regularly occurred in a classroom when he noticed a peer crying because he was at the back of the line. Without hesitation, Roman left his spot towards the front of the line and went back to his friend. What was amazing was that several of Roman's peers, in noticing this act, joined Roman at the back, comforting their peer. Roman is a flexible thinker and can easily compromise when needed. He is confident and assertive by standing up for himself and others around him. Roman is the kind of person that makes you feel happy just because you're around him. His positivity is contagious. Roman knows his strengths and areas of weakness. However, he doesn't boast when he excels, nor does he avoid social or academic activities that may be more challenging for him. He is an excellent example of perseverance and loving yourself for who you are. Roman takes pride in his work and loves to learn new things. He is always participating in class lessons and is an incredibly valuable member of his classroom community. I believe Roman exemplifies excellent citizenship and would make a fantastic Pittsford Pride Citizen Recognition Award winner. Congratulations, Roman. My third student this evening is Vinay Pendry. Vinay, where are you? Hello, Vinay. Vinay is an 11th grader and was nominated by Michelle Legg from Mendon High School. Vinay Pendry is an outstanding student when it comes to his commitment to the community service. He has volunteered over 300 hours during high school, most of it during the pandemic. When on-site volunteering opportunities were unavailable to students, Vinay showed leadership and teamwork in creating new virtual opportunities for himself and others by co-founding Rock Code Mendon Chapter, recruiting 12 students from both high schools to teach coding and spread Rock Code's mission of equality in computing science. He personally teaches 7 students ages 7 to 14, provides training for new teachers, and creates virtual education events with 5 local libraries. He also co-founded the virtual TEDx conference, I like that name, TEDx conference, for Mendon High School, organized logistics, oversaw social media pages, and assisted speakers with presentations. In addition, he tutors K through 12 on a variety of subjects and volunteered as a camp counselor, teaching science curriculum while serving as a role model. Vinay is always professional and follows through with action on suggestions from our office. I can count on him to consistently reply to emails promptly, something that differentiates him from his peers. Yes. During this summer, Vinay participated in the Career Exploration Internship program, performing physics research at the University of Rochester. He exceeded the 40-hour requirement by completing 152 non-paid work hours, showing his dedication and commitment to hard work. In addition, he is an honor roll student, actively involved in numerous competitive clubs, Science Olympiad, Math League, Masterminds, and American Statesman Initiative, as well as other activities such as the Newspaper Club, Model UN, and Track and Field. Plus, he performs with the Rochester Philharmonic Youth Orchestra and the New York State Solo Festivals. Furthermore, Vinay has achieved Gold Medal Award in Spanish Level 2 and is the recipient of the American Chemical Society Award. Placed second in the Rochester region for the National Chemistry Olympiad exam, and is a member of the Johns Hopkins University Study of Exceptional Talent, where he received the Talented Youth Search Award for high scores in the SAT. That's impressive. He is a remarkable student who exemplifies Mendon's strong values. Congratulations. Now we welcome back Superintendent Pirro.
So if you saw me leave, I'm fighting age. I left my glasses in my room. That's actually so pathetic. I can't even. I just can't. So here we are. We're on the final stretch. Our last 3 wonderful candidates. Our first please stand. Fifth grader from Thornell Road, James Pritchard, nominated by Mrs. Farrington. Hey, James. Every Thursday at our school, students and staff reflect on what it means to live the Thornell Road way. Together we pledge to be respectful, responsible, fair, trustworthy, and caring, even when no one is watching. James is a terrific role model who demonstrates these principles every day. Because of this, it is fitting to recognize him with our Pittsford Pride Student Citizenship Award. James simply lights up the room with his positivity, polite interactions, inclusive nature, giving heart, and his sunny disposition. No matter who is around, he always does his best to make everyone feel welcomed. He thrives working with peers that have differing abilities and often seeks out opportunities to help others. His spirit of service is contagious, and it spreads like wildfire between his friends and his acquaintances. Our classroom community has seamlessly adopted James's inclusive nature. James and his classmates are some of the most giving, forward-thinking, and compassionate kids I know. Being able to teach, learn, and grow alongside them has been an incredible blessing. I admire James for his flexibility and for his perseverance. As we all know, the past 2 years have been filled with challenges, newness, and many questions. James not only conquers every difficult situation with his head held high, but he also serves as a guide to anyone that's struggling. James is a very talented and dedicated athlete. He participates in basketball, baseball, and football. James is also a leader of our unofficial but highly successful class kickball team. Is that a good team? Yeah. He often serves as captain. In all these areas, James demonstrates outstanding sportsmanship and is willing to serve as coach to friends that may be new to the sport. I am so impressed by all the ways James lives the Thornell Road way. He is an extraordinary role model for what it means to be an outstanding citizen of our school community. Congratulations, James. I am so proud to be your teacher, and I cannot wait to see how you continue to make the world a better place for everyone. Congratulations. And we have Piper Ray Webb, fifth grader from Allen Creek, nominated by Catherine Milne. You ready? Okay. Are you embarrassed? Should we have your mom put that down, or are you good? Are you okay with it right there? Okay. No, you can point to her. That's better. I am proud to nominate Piper for the Pittsford Pride Award. As her homeroom teacher, I have watched Piper seamlessly transition back to in-person learning this year as a fifth grader at Allen Creek. She consistently comes to school with a positive attitude and a willingness to learn. Along with her kind, calm demeanor, Piper's ability to be flexible and understanding are qualities that myself, her peers, and that her teachers value. It is apparent how much Piper's peers respect and look up to her as a role model. Our class elected her as student council representative in her homeroom. Her peers trust her words and actions as she represents our class when making decisions that affect all of us. One of the things I am most proud of Piper for is her underlying patience and desire to work with students who have various needs. Piper has taken it amongst herself to support peers who need help with organization and for staying on task. She has formed genuine friendships with many students, but there is one in particular who values her friendship more than anything. It is clear how meaningful Piper's impact on the student is, for when she is absent, he feels lost. Piper has an uncanny ability to pull people together, regardless of previously formed friendships. She is an incredible artist whom her peers recognize and want to learn from. I have seen Piper teaching a group of students how to draw different things, boosting their confidence as they create art together. I am grateful to have Piper as a student this year and know that she will continue to do wonderful things in our district and our community. Piper's natural ability to make friends, share her ideas, and commit to being herself make her an excellent nominee for Pittsford Pride. Congratulations, Piper. Next, we have Elborts Yusufi Nurai, 5th grader from Park Road, nominated by Ms. Rojas, Mrs. Greco, and Mrs. Nuffer. There we are. And we met earlier. I have the same shirt he's wearing. We're going to have lunch together and take a picture sometime of that. Okay, so we're going to start with Elbort's classroom teacher, Ms. Rojas, says he is a very conscientious student who never hesitates to help others. His work ethic is well above the typical 5th grader, and he always puts forth his best effort. He is not boastful or over the top. He never expects praise or recognition in return for his kind acts. He is a very thoughtful and kind student. He is extremely responsible and mature for a 5th grade student. He is trustworthy and he is respectful. He is always willing to help others, and he's a great role model for other students. Elborst has been serving as a 5th grade safety for one of our 1st grade classrooms since September 2021. Mrs. Greco and Mrs. Nuffer said he goes above and beyond in his safety role. He takes his role very seriously and always ensures our students are escorted safely to their various dismissal locations and buses. More importantly, he is an excellent role model for the students in our class. He selected a book at the fall book fair and generously donated it to our class. The book was called I Promise by LeBron James, which was about how important it is to try and do your best. He took the time to make individual holiday cards for each of our students in class and personalize them for each student. He wrote down each student's name and ensured he spelled each name correctly. He is kind, generous, and selfless. He has taken time out of his day to read to our class and is always willing to step up and help when asked to do so by a teacher. It has been a pleasure having Elborst as one of our safety, and he truly embodies what it means to be a good citizen and a role model for others. Congratulations. So at this point, just want to remind parents and guardians what your obligations are moving forward. High school car, middle school dinner, elementary treat. Okay, we're all good there. So we're going to ask all 9 recipients, if you could, to go over and get your plaque and your letter, and then find a place behind the Board of Education. And everyone is welcome to take pictures, but before we all take pictures, if we could stand and give our students a standing ovation, please.
I don't know. Okay, we're going to resume our meeting. I have the pleasure of introducing our Barker Road Middle School principal, Ms. Jacob. This is your first report to the Board of Education. We thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the tour that we had. I've been saying this for some months now, but we look forward to a day when we can have our coffee with the staff. Please tell them that we miss chatting with them. So
yes.
Thank you for being here this evening.
Of course, and thank you for having me. And I got to say, going on a night at Pittsford Pride, I mean, that's a really hard act to follow.
No
I'm gonna do my
pressure.
best.
No pressure.
So no pressure, I know, right? So yes, thank you for having me, and it was wonderful to have the board in the building last week, and it was even better, I think, on Friday evening when that snow day that Mr. Pirro promised came true for everyone. So I know our Barker Road students were very excited about that because they got a little tease of that on the morning bark that morning. So thank you. So I want to highlight Before I get into Barker Road's areas of focus, I do want to highlight that for Barker Road, the start of the school year really started in the summer. We had a program over the summer where our mental health, our counselors and mental health team identified some students that we knew would have maybe a harder transition back to a full 5-day return. And so they created the Summer Bridge program where those students were invited to come in for a week. And it was a really warm environment to get those students back in the building, seeing staff and things like that. The day started with community circle. We worked on things like executive functioning, mindfulness, how to kind of quell some of that anxiety or nervousness that they might be feeling coming back to school for the full 5 days. And it was really well received by the kids. The afternoon was great. We had different activities planned throughout the week, one of which was rocket making, which was very exciting. But it was just a really great way to have these students come into the building, feel that love from staff and that support, so that when that first day of school came, that it would be a little softer, a little bit more welcoming, a little safer environment for them. We also had our sixth grade web orientation, which was fantastic. We had kids back in the building. We had kids working together and collaborating with our 8th grade web leaders. So we had a lot of activity even at the start of the school year, including locker setup, which it was amazing to me how long students at sometimes, and their parents that would be with them, would spend with the LED lighting and the chandeliers and all of that. So we had a true middle school experience that started right from the get-go, leading up to the start of the school year. This year, we really we're focusing on 3 different areas within Barker Road: health and safety, community building, and then within our equity and inclusivity lens, we're really focusing on student voice. So I'll share a little bit about each of those now. So when I said health and safety, what really we focused on is how to create a safe space while still being able to be a true Barker Road Middle School student. So how can we create those social opportunities that we know our middle schoolers thrive on while still being able to have a safe space in which to do that? We had to get creative. Our PE staff was so gracious to lend half of our small gym to now our second cafeteria eating space, if you will. But it was really important to make sure that we could have the students together during things like lunches so they could have that social break throughout the day. We saw our clubs and activities back up and running, full speed ahead. You can see a picture there from our fishing club, our Pittsford Fishing Club, one very, very early morning. We also had our after-school activities like intramurals running full steam ahead and things like that. So it was really important for our staff and, of course, our students and families to be able to experience these opportunities. We had a number of grade level activities like our 6th grade movie night that, again, we just had to think outside the box to figure out how to make it happen, but we were able to make it happen, and that was really great. We had some activity nights and so forth. And I just want to say thank you to PTSA for also being those creative thinking partners that we that have been great sounding boards and collaborators in how to make some of these activities especially happen at Barker Road. So a lot of excitement and feeling that sense of what middle school should feel like for our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So the other thing too we're focusing on this year is our community building opportunities. We right from the get-go held welcome back assemblies for all of our students in smaller settings, where we talked about what it means to be a kind, caring student. We talked about our core principles at Barker Road and what those mean to us, but also what they look like in action. I think that we can see something on the wall, we can say something, but really what does it mean when it's in place and we're seeing it actually play out within our school community. So we really focused a lot on what it means to be an upstander, to focus on if you see something that might not be right, what do we do? How do we go about sharing with an adult, a trusted adult, or either at school or at home? So that was really important, and that conversation has continued throughout the school year within classrooms, and also Mr. Victor and I have been pushing into our enrichment periods to have those smaller settings to be able to talk with kids as well. Community circles. So you can see in the picture there, that was right from the get-go. We started utilizing our mental health staff, our wonderful counselors and psychologists, and focusing on making sure that within the first couple weeks of school, every student experienced a community circle within a setting. And those are being used now at a much higher rate that we've seen in the past. We are using them within classrooms, we're using them in larger settings, really to focus on, again, strengthening the community within Barker Road. We're also seeing some academic circles playing out in some of our classroom settings, and we've also utilized them for some restorative settings as well, to focus on repair and restore when there's been situations that we've had to address. We're also focusing, I know every building is looking at this, but we are looking at some relationship mapping within the building. We were able to have our counselors come into our PE classes and be able to focus on all of our students and the trusted adult that they have in the building. And in some cases, if they don't identify a trusted adult, how do we as a team, a staff, figure out how to make those connections that are so vital and so important to our students? So that's what we're in the middle of right now, is looking at those students that don't have that person for them potentially in the building, and how do we reach out and engage them and make the connection. So a lot of, and it all, to be honest, when you think about the health and safety aspect and what it means to be a Barker Road student, the community, and then this next piece, it really all melds together and supports each other. So we're really trying to just create a foundation across the board at Barker Road. So we also, when looking at our inclusivity when looking at our inclusivity piece for our goal this year, we also have been looking specifically at how to elevate student voices within for our students. Elevate student voices as well as their experiences and their lived stories. So this has looked kind of different across the board. We see it on a larger scale and smaller scale. Within our classrooms, we're really focusing on creating spaces for choice, student choice and opportunity. Things like, book club choices, a lot more, I think we've talked as a staff that there's been a lot more one-on-one interactions between staff and student, and creating those spaces to be able to support students in that very unique individual way. As I mentioned, circles are being held within classrooms, and just simple things that you don't really think about, like especially they've been working at it at all grade levels, but really with our sixth graders. And what does it look to be a self-advocate? How do you advocate for yourself? And something as simple as, how do you email your teacher? Which I know we don't think about, but that's like a really big skill that, our kids need to have in which to be, have their voice and be able to share and advocate for themselves. So just even simple things like that we've been really working on as well. The staff has been amazing. They have consistently, in all the conversations that we have been having, they have focused on putting students' social emotional needs first. And so they have been so gracious with their time within their classrooms to, an idea comes up and we want to get in and do some stuff during an enrichment, and people yield that time without question. And I think that that's really important. Because they constantly are keeping students in the forefront of every conversation. So that's really powerful, and I'm just so lucky to work with a staff that's doing that. And then also just opportunities within the classroom as well for students to be able to share their story, whatever that may be. So that also has been something that has really been impactful as well. We certainly have been talking about, for myself and Mr. Vigdor, having that open door, open conversation policy with students. They can come see us anytime. We've made ourselves available. And the kids have really been amazing. They've taken us up on a lot of things. So when things have come up in the fall, one of the first things came up was the hat discussion, of course. And so we met with students, and we followed up them with staff and had those conversations to make sure that students were feeling heard and supported. Our mental health team as well has been incredible. They are a constant support for our students, of course. And then the other thing that is up and running this year is our Barker Road Inclusivity Council. And I am so proud of these students. We have 20 students. It's a mixed grade level group that actually had a little application. They applied to be part of the group and why it was important to them. And they've done some fantastic work as well. And I actually want to take a moment and recognize one of those students. So I have Sophia Leachy here. She's an 8th grader at Barker Road, and she just was going to speak briefly to what the Inclusivity Council, why she joined, and what it's been like thus far. Sophia.
Hi, I'm Sophia Leachy. I'm an 8th grader here at Barker Road. I'm part of the Inclusivity and Diversity Council, and I have been since 6th grade. I first joined with Mrs. Kataya. I joined because I wanted to make sure that everyone feels included and safe in the school. I also connected very deeply with the council because I am part of a biracial family. My mom is American and my dad is Brazilian. Now that may not be obvious by my complexion, but for some of my friends it is. That can be a blessing and a curse. For example, if I look more like my dad, I would have a tan that lasted throughout the winter. But people might also judge me because I'm Latina. Now, this is just one example, and this is not even close to how harsh some people have it of different races. Not only different races, but different religions, sexualities, identities, and disabilities. In addition, I have many friends who are diverse with different sexualities, religions, races, etc. I want Barker Road to be a place where everyone can feel safe because it must be difficult to attempt to learn anything while you feel like you're walking on eggshells. Since Mrs. Jacob has taken over, it has been just as wonderful. I love all the input that the students get to have, hence why I'm here. Students are voices for the other students. It may sound a little cheesy, but the improvement has been immense. For example, when I was in 6th grade, I advocated for Muslim students to be able to go to the library for lunch during Ramadan, so they wouldn't have to watch other students eat, because I had a Muslim friend who felt left out. Another example is we highlighted diverse traditions and cultures throughout a school mural. Did you know it's the Year of the Tiger and Chinese Lunar New Year? I hope that I can continue to work on projects with the Inclusivity and Diversity Council, because it benefits everyone. Here in Pittsford in elementary school, the schools sometimes pretend everything is sunshine and rainbows. The Inclusivity and Diversity Council doesn't sugarcoat the truth. The council combats exclusivity. I hope that this has been insightful. Thank you for listening and have a good night.
Another example of one of our wonderful students. So this year, I think for our Inclusivity Council, we've done a couple things thus far. We are looking at our core principles. We want to make sure that they're as reflective as they can be of our student population and what it means to us. So we're taking a look at those this year. And most recently, the council was extremely involved in our planning for Black History Month. So we have been working with our PTSA DEI liaisons. They came to one of our meetings last month, and the group has been amazing in our ideas and planning for Black History Month. It was everything from maybe more simpler activities to implement in the building to actually plotting to have a Twitter bombardment of Amanda Gorman to come to Barker Road, which hasn't panned out yet, but there's still hope. But they shoot for the sky, and that's what's so incredible about working with them. We have a number of activities planned. I think the one that I think is most exciting is that the council came up with highlighting through enrichment Black individuals that have made an impact throughout history and currently. And so we will have 32 hallway displays outside of classroom doors by the 18th that our staff and students are working on. And I think it's just going to be really beautiful and exciting to see how the students harness that creativity and in this celebration of Black History Month. The group is also partnering with other clubs within our council. So in March, we're actually working with our GSA. So lots to come and lots of excitement. But that is just a little of what's been going on at Barker Road so far. So any questions or?
I want to acknowledge that, Sophia, to take time out of your evening to be with us, that's pretty incredible. Your presentation was amazing, and we thank you so much. Did I take you by surprise? I just want to thank you for your time this evening, because I know you have other things to do other than be here. And so for you, by sharing what you did with us this evening has been really informative for the board to hear. So thank you so much for being here. And Sarah, your presentation was awesome. Sarah, thank you for being here. Did anyone have
Absolutely.
questions?
All right. Thank you,
you,
everyone.
Sarah.
Have a good night. Okay, we will move into our annual public hearing on the Code of Conduct. Shayna?
Good evening. I'm so happy to be here to bring you finally the third phase and now our complete code of conduct. So I was here earlier in the year, and we reestablished the work that's been going on really over several years. And so I wanted to just acknowledge and thank Dr. Patricia Von Brogan, who really led the beginning of this work and set me up for success in starting to move this forward by bringing together an amazing stakeholder group of just varied community members, students, teachers, administrators, and some co-facilitators that I'll share with you. But that really helped us to be able to get moving right away when I stepped into the role in July. So I appreciate that very much. And I also want to just thank Nancy Wayman and our communication office. The document that you see does not look like what I gave her. It was a poorly formatted Word document that had been wordsmithed by many, many groups. And so they turned it around and did what they do and made it look like the document that you have here. So although it is a hefty document, I'm going to be brief this evening and just talk you through a little bit about the process that we followed and some of the more pertinent changes that you'll notice as you're working through it. There we go. So we had a stakeholder group of about 25 members. We ended up adding a couple students even in additionally to our additional 4. So we had 6 students. We had parent members, teachers, support staff, administrators. And then we had 4 co-facilitators through Peary and the Children's Institute. And they were invaluable. So working with them through the summer to really start understanding where we had been, what documents had already been looked at, and where we were really heading within our process. And if you can imagine, when we first got started, beginning of this school year in September and October, nationally and locally, we were going through a lot. So coming back to school full time, when you talk about the Code of Conduct and the Dignity for All Students Act, we were dealing with a lot here locally as well. And there was a lot of passion from the dedicated people who were a part of this group and a lot of emotion. And being able to really harness that to make us use that toward our product and to be able to really make some good decisions that would help benefit our students was really what we ended up doing with those co-facilitators. So they really helped to put us in a mindset to be able to do that important work together and to keep our students at the forefront. And a lot of that work was done in affinity groups. So so I don't know that I would have thought of that without them, but really allowing our students to work together with one of those co-facilitators, allowing our parents to work together, having teachers work separately and administrators. It wasn't just about having people in the same room, but allowing them to be in a space where they felt safe to be able to share some common experiences or maybe not common experiences to really genuinely help get everybody's feedback as we were moving forward. And then once we worked through this third phase, we brought this through many different groups, including our Inclusivity Advisory Committee, our elementary and secondary leadership teams, our Dignity Act coordinators. That group's been working together really closely this year, our central office team, and our PDTA members as well. So we're so grateful. Some of you have seen this document many, many times. Melanie has graciously put this on many of her agendas, and every time, regardless of how many times someone's been through it, they've been able to come back with really thoughtful feedback to help continue to make it grow and be better for our students. So the purpose of really this final phase was to restore that, to frame that restorative mindset. So even some of the things that Ms. Jacob was just talking about with the community circles and a lot of the work that we're already doing, we wanted to make sure that the code really matched up to that work and where we're heading. And we wanted it to also be goal-oriented and continuing to move us forward. We wanted to make sure that there were opportunities for transparency. So whether it's our families, whether it's students, whether it's staff or administrators, that they could go to this document and be able to understand clearly not just what their rights and responsibilities are, but where does that land within the code. And I think within that you'll see that we'll talk momentarily that we actually did a little bit more explaining of some pieces in there to lay the groundwork and the context for that than we're used to seeing in a document of this nature. And then we wanted there to be some more opportunities for us to be consistent, and it's already really helped us in bringing some of our groups together across buildings and across levels. So it was really finding a balance between allowing for more consistency and transparency, but also being flexible and recognizing that anything we're working through, we're dealing with children, and we're dealing with individual and unique circumstances. So we were always looking to strive for that balance. This was one of the pieces that was really front and center. So as you're going through the first couple phases, the first page you'll see in this third phase is that restorative mindset graphic. And we liked this chart in particular because it was a more simple way of looking at when are we being restorative and when are we not. As we shift our thinking on this, it makes me think of my own children because it's always easy to be more restorative with somebody else's children. And I think about sometimes how I can shift my thinking. So it wouldn't ever happen in my house, but if I were in my house and my children are upstairs and I'm hearing, the voices start elevating and all of a sudden there's the scream and then the mom, and you kind of charge into that area. And depending on your own mindset heading into there, that can go very different ways. So if it's, she hit me first, you can have that non-restorative approach. I wouldn't, but some people could, where you walk in and you just go to your rooms. I don't want to hear about it anymore. We don't hit in this house, or say you're sorry, move on. Or if you're really in a good place, you could say, if I hear anything else about this, then you're going to lose insert electronics, trips with your friends, whatever it is. So when we have that more restorative mindset, we're asking ourselves, are we ready to have a conversation about, me personally, am I ready to have a conversation about this? And how can I help these two individuals to learn, to be able to work through these situations so we're not doing this often and we're actually moving them forward in their own interactions. So we may still separate, right, whatever that consequence is. We're separating, we're calming, we're having conversations about what actually happened, what were you thinking, how are you going to repair this and be accountable for what you did, right? So how are you going to repair that? How can I help you with that? Also, we don't hit, and that's not acceptable, right? So we're getting to the same place a lot where that traditional piece may still be there, but how are we using that time in a way that when we walk away, our kids know you're in a supportive environment where we're here to help you work through these pieces and that you have the skills to be able to do better next time. So as we're thinking and shifting from that restorative lens, a couple of the things that we wanted to really focus on here was to have this encompass the work of where we are right now. And a lot of the work that we've been doing in the district over the last few years through our Inclusivity Advisory Council, through our Special Education Advisory Council, Instructional Leadership Council, our district planning team, have been looking at a lot of data around our students and some of the disproportionality that we've seen. And we've seen that through disproportionality with students who are in special education or are students of color when it comes to behavioral referrals and in other areas. We've seen that for our students in the LGBTQ plus community in terms of how they're feeling connected in school. And so we wanted to make sure that we explained that and built that context a little bit, which is not typical in a code of conduct. But we felt that that was important because we were making more of a shift in that area. So we hope as this document continues to grow and change, that we can continue to grow and change the document to match where we are. We also felt it was important when we're talking about discrimination and harassment to specifically call out those areas when we're talking about acts of racism, when we're talking about harassment or discrimination around our LGBTQ plus community. And our principals actually felt that it was really important to make sure that we included those in the levels of behavior, which you also see within the document. So I just pulled out one here to look at. You obviously have all of them to see, but this is level 2. So we looked at a lot of different codes of conduct, and some of them had 20 plus pages of listing every single behavior you could ever imagine, everything from tapping a pencil too hard in class to arson and everything in between. And we felt that was a bit much in listing every single phase or level that could fall into. That wasn't really what we wanted the focus of the code of conduct to be. We really wanted it to be about what is an idea of what falls into these different levels, and most importantly, how are we intervening and what are the responses that we have at these different levels so that our kids know what to expect, so that our staff know what their expectation is, and so that can help give some more consistency across buildings and across levels. So it's important to know that any behaviors that are listed there are not all inclusive, right? They're meant to be more general and to allow for some of that flexibility. And that's why you'll see in some areas it says things like minor or major. We're not going to list how many tardies make it minor or major, right? There's a lot of unique circumstances that go into those different situations, and we wanted this document to continue to allow for that flexibility in decision making. So really, one of the last things I wanted to highlight, I think, is something that really does make this document stand out. And you may have noticed at the beginning, it's actually titled Code of Conduct and Restorative Supports, because some of the things that we saw in some other documents were some actual toolkit type items. And so we ended up adding those as an appendix. So you'll see that there are quite a few different resources to be able to support that restorative work. Some of the things that Ms. Jacob was just talking about. So if you look at having a community circle in your classroom, here's an example to the right there, some questions for checking in. There's actually several pages of questions like that within that toolkit, because you might be having a circle for lots of different reasons. So it just gives teachers an opportunity to go to that and say, I want to have a quick circle. I want some good questions, which really is at the focus of having a circle, is what are those questions that we're using to focus the group. So that was something really great in there. And then again, these restorative versus non-restorative questions, when we're talking to a student, instead of, what did you do? What were you thinking kind of thing, really getting the background of that. And we really like that adult checklist as well, asking those questions like, is this student ready for the conversation? Am I ready for the conversation? Am I being non-judgmental? Am I seeking to understand what actually happened? So we were excited when we put this in the hands of teachers. I think when we were on the IAC, one of the teachers said, I know I can't take this with me, but can I just take some pictures of this to take it, to be able to share with one of my friends who's struggling with a situation. So that was really great to hear that it might be something that our staff are really interested in accessing, because what we don't want is this to just go on the shelf and it's only pulled off, when an administrator goes to work with a student on a disciplinary issue. So next steps with the code, so obviously bringing it here and seeking any feedback or answering questions. And then really the important next steps are training. So how are we making sure that we all have some foundational language, some foundational understanding around that restorative approach? That will start. We're working with Peary and the Children's Institute in developing a training for our administrative team. So in March, we'll be able to bring that to our district leadership team, and then we'll be able to turnkey that training on Superintendent's Day in April so that all of our staff are able to have really that foundational knowledge. We're working with the Dignity Act coordinators. They're actually meeting, so there's one Dignity Act coordinator in each building that's trained and responsible for that DASA implementation. So we've been meeting monthly to be able to talk about how are we training students. You actually heard Sarah talking about some of the things that they do, like class meetings or things like that. That's part of how we train students around what is the Code of Conduct, what are your rights and responsibilities, what's the Dignity for All Students Act. That happens in all buildings and at all levels in varied ways, but it can be less consistent between buildings. So what we want is for administrators and staff to still have a bit of flexibility there, but we're going to name what those essentials are. Of every high school student will see these items. Every staff member will see these items. So we'll create those consistent resources to be able to help train our students and staff on an annual basis. And then we have created, again, with Nancy's office's support, some summary documents, because this is a lengthier document. So we have a couple summaries, one really looking at making decisions around disciplinary responses, and then another around the restorative responses and taking out some of the toolkit pieces that we think teachers might want to have just right there and be able to keep it right on their desk. And of course, this is meant to be a flexible document and to be looked at annually. And so as we continue to work through this school year and through the summer, we'll look through and see, as those phases have melded together, are there areas where there's redundancies or things that we could clean up within there? And then are there things that come up that we would want to add or change as we move forward? And that is just a brief overview of where we've been and a few highlights for you as you're looking through it, but I'm genuinely really happy to hear any feedback or answer any questions.
Yeah, in just the short time that we've had an opportunity to review it, a few things jumped out at me. First of all, it's approachability. It's the style, the tone, the organization is first rate. I found it very easy to follow and the language to read. And the other thing, I also found it to be informational and educational. Back in my day, it was, a code of conduct was a draconian document. You do this, you get that. And this is not that. There's elements of that, but I found it to be very informational. Just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you.
And you're right, it looks very different than it did when you first presented it.
Yes.
Because we were a little confused going back and forth.
Yes.
So it looks amazing. Thank you to everyone who was involved in that effort, because that is not something that's an easy task. So we really appreciate all the time and effort that you took to come up with this final draft.
Thank you. It's definitely an enormous team, so I was really happy to be a part of it.
And if I could just highlight one other part to make sure that the people that are out there even understand, because this is a quick update. When we talk about our code of conduct and restorative practices, it's restorative practices in addition to.
That's right.
Right? It's in addition to consequences. So this isn't about just restoring. It's about you have to take your medicine along with making things better that you disrupted. So it's a great balance. And thank you and your team for all that you've done with it.
Thank you.
Okay. May I have an approval of the minutes from January 25th, please? Thanks, Sarah and Jeff. Any edits? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Board of Education reports. You can see the dates that we have listed here. We do have an update from our legislative meeting this weekend, and Sarah is going to start us off, but anyone who was in attendance that would like to add anything, feel free to do so after we hear from Sarah.
We had a great turnout this weekend at the legislative breakfast, over 100 members and 20 legislators. So my first experience of being at the legislative breakfast, but I really enjoyed everything about it. We had 2 rounds of meetings, as you know. So the first table that I was sitting at was with Senator Samara Brook, and she was actually virtual, so she was on Zoom, and had a couple of challenges initially just trying to hear her, and she did have 2 representatives there, but took a little bit of time, so I unfortunately missed some of her early answers. I think just a question number 1 and some introductions, but what I found most helpful to us right now was the question about the waiver that we've been talking about for our bus driver certification. We've been looking at the federal waiver to not require or remove the under the hood component of the testing requirement. As we've heard from Darren, that New York State has not implemented this as we thought they would be. And so we asked her that question of what she had heard about that, and she had said that she's encouraging New York State to support this waiver, and that the state is running into barriers, which I missed her explanation of what those barriers were, unfortunately. But she did say they're having weekly conversations, and she's not sure why it's taking so long. She's thinking maybe some sticking points with the DOT or something on the executive side, but recognizing that this was supposed to be an immediate fix for us, for all the districts in New York, and just how vital that is to us right now as we work to address the larger problem of recruitment and retention. So she is working on that, which was nice to hear. Similar to that, related to that, was the question about local testing sites, and her response to that was that a conversation has taken place with the county clerk, and that she would be following up on that for us. The idea was again brought to her attention of using BOCES 2 as a testing site, and she said that was the first time that she had heard of that in particular, so she asked for more information from Monroe County School Boards to follow up on that. One of the last questions that I was there for, or I think actually the last question, was about, as Darren was saying tonight in the budget report, about the zero emission buses. So she wants more information from us. What she's looking for is some of the challenges that we're faced with, including infrastructure, and what we would need to implement these changes that the state is now requiring of us. So she is looking for that information so that she can advocate for us in Albany. So,
Aside from bus drivers.
certainly that, yes, but making the change over to the electric buses, yeah. My second meeting was with Mayor Malik Evans. Really enjoyed that conversation as well. There was just a lot of good information sharing about the violence and some of the issues that they're having right now in the city, and I really liked his plan of, or idea rather, of bringing jobs to these young people and giving them a sense of belonging through work. And I thought that was a great idea. I'd love to see this implemented, and of course if there's any way that we can be supportive to those efforts and keeping kids occupied so that they can stay out of trouble, I think that's a great idea, and I hope we can support him in that effort. Yeah, that's kind of my summary there.
Anyone else? Robin, did you want to share anything?
Yes, I sat at the table with Assemblyman Bronson, and the biggest takeaway from there, he has a very great interest in mental health supports for our children, and he said that he and Assemblyperson Lunsford support a line item for mental health. So that was key. I also sat with the Zoom effort from State Senator Brooke, and and her team. I shared with her team a request from Darren Kennedy that we have some type of civil service workarounds during this time, because staffing challenges are very prevalent in this environment. So, thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Jeff, did you have anything to add?
Mike and I met with Congressman Morelli, and actually he elaborated a little bit on the under-the-hood requirement. Apparently, according to the congressman, the states run into some federal bureaucracy in actually implementing the change. He explained to us that his office is trying to work through that red tape to actually get the state in the program. So.
Renee, did you have anything to add?
So aside from sitting with Mike and Jeff, I also had the opportunity to sit with Regent Wade Norwood, and this was my first time ever meeting him. He is quite a wealth of information. He definitely gives very long answers, so we barely got through many of the questions. But what he had to say was pretty eye-opening. So one of the first questions that was asked was regarding staffing at SED. And what I found surprising, quite honestly, is that they're having the same staffing issues as everybody else is. There are just not enough applicants out there to fill the jobs. He also talked about funding being an issue at the state level as well. From there, he kind of talked about what I assume can only be a passion project of his, that over the past 5 years, his whole big idea is about relationships within the field of education and how he wants to unite lots of different groups. So whether it's connecting healthcare with schools, with social services, it sounded like using one platform to be able to share information regarding students, what's going on in districts, and not just from a board perspective, but from a teacher perspective. That sounds very promising and extraordinarily helpful. So hopefully we'll get some more information regarding that. And Joe Morelli briefly talked about it too, if I'm not mistaken, within our group.
I think that he was referring to the SIP project, System Integration Project.
Never named it, but
Yeah.
he was talking about it.
There will be lots of information coming down the pipeline with respect to that. So thank you for being there. The legislative breakfast, just for those in the audience, we had actually every one of our districts in Monroe County was represented there. And of course, we also had conversations about lifting the restrictions on mask mandating. So that was a topic of conversation at most of the tables as well. Okay. Unfortunately, our trip to Albany has been canceled, and that's primarily because the Legislative Office Building is currently closed. There's not a sign as to when they're going to reopen. We're hopeful that they will reopen by March, but to have to coordinate a 2-day trip for all of our countywide colleagues to go to Albany and risk losing the funds that we spend to go to this event, not knowing that the building will even be open, is probably not worth it at this time. That doesn't mean that we're not going to advocate. We're going to advocate probably our district alone, and I've talked to Sarah a little bit about that. Having independent meetings, I think, with our legislators is going to be important going forward to have them better understand what our specific needs are within our district. So more to come there. Couple dates to remember that are coming up. February 21st through the 25th, schools will be closed for President's Day recess. On the 1st of March will be our next board meeting. With that, I'm turning it over to Darren for the financial report.
Thank you. We have the December 2021 Treasurer's Report. For the general fund revenue, we received $772,000 in state aid for excess cost aid and for lottery grant aid. Congratulations, Mr. Superintendent, buying a winning lottery ticket. That was a joke. So, and then for the school lunch fund, the good news is our participation is back up to where it was 3 years ago, actually a little beyond it, in some buildings far beyond it. So as you can see from the report, our revenue is up more than 3 times at this point in time last year. So the program is trending much better.
Thank you. May I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report, please? Thanks, Ted. Did I see your arm over here? Robin? Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay. Next is the second quarter extra classroom activities report. That's a mouthful. Activity is up a little bit, obviously, than last year, but not quite to where it was about 3 years ago. I didn't see anything abnormal with the report.
Okay. May I have a motion, please? Renee and Sarah, questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
And lastly, declaration of scrap equipment, fitness equipment at Hawkins Road Middle School. We spoke earlier about the project, and I remember some of this equipment being purchased in this capital project. So it's at the end of life, so we are recommending that it be declared as scrap, and then we will put it out to bid for sale.
May I have a motion, please? Thanks, Pete and Renee. I just had one tiny question. With the, I believe it was the Life Fitness elliptical, was the year correct on that, 2020?
No.
I didn't think so. Only because it made mention of the parts that were exposed. I didn't know if
Yeah,
it
it
was.
should be 2002.
Okay, I figured because the other equipment was around that. Okay, great. Thanks, Darren. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thanks, Darren. Human Resource Report, Sean.
Hello. So first you'll note the change of status probationary to tenure for 3 administrators. We
Okay.
also have, does that need board action first?
Mhm.
Okay, so that's for your consideration?
I think they want us to take board action on that.
I think so.
I'm
I
pretty.
think so. Let's go with that. Let's do that.
Let's try it. Okay, may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Ted and Robin. All in favor? Opposed? Oh, I should have asked any questions. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed?
Not opposed.
Okay.
A little
Okay.
slow on the draw.
Okay. Motion carried.
Thank you. Next for your consideration is the professional staff report. We have 2 certificated staff appointments, 1 part-time to probationary appointment, 2 SRP appointments, appointments for teacher fellows, 1 teacher resignation, and 3 SRP resignations.
May I have a motion, please? I saw Sarah first, and then Renee. Questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. Next for your consideration is the support staff report. We have 2 clerical appointments, 1 clerical resignation, 1 bus driver resignation, 1 maintenance mechanic retirement, 1 bus driver termination, 1 cleaner appointment, 1 food service worker appointment, and 1 food service worker resignation.
Okay, may I have a motion, please? Jeff and Pete, questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. And finally, for your consideration, we have an updated special salaries report for per diem substitutes and specialists.
May I have a motion?
So moved.
Ted and Sarah, questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Special Education Report, Elizabeth.
Good evening. Recommendations of the Committee on Special Education and Committee on Preschool Special Education are on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Superintendent's Report, Mike.
I'm pleased to report we do not need an executive session this evening.
Oh, great.
For your consideration, I'm going to ask for the board to vote on the volunteer first responder partial property tax exemption resolution. I did have, just call your attention to one addition that I made to the resolution as we combined different versions was left out. And that was specifically to call out enrolled members with 2 or more years of service enlisting the number of years of service served by each such enrolled member together with the enrolled member's residence address will be something that's certified and brought to our district for consideration. So we started in January. We had a presentation, and several of the folks are here that did a presentation, our volunteer firefighters. Then we had a second meeting, which was our public hearing, and tonight is the vote, where we will be asking the board to vote on a partial tax exemption that essentially would allow voluntary only members of the fire and ambulance to receive a 10% tax exemption. So with that, I'd like to see if we have a motion for approval.
Second.
Any questions?
I had a comment really or statement, I guess I should say, that I just wanted to read. As a board member, it's my responsibility to look out for the best interests of our entire student body and their families as extensions of them. I sincerely hope that if any of our families ever find themselves in a position of needing a first responder, that there's one there to answer the call. The safety of our community is not something to be taken lightly. As Chief Payne shared with us last month, we've been able to depend upon the Pittsford Fire Department for nearly 125 years. 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, we can take comfort in knowing that a volunteer firefighter will stop what they're doing to come to our rescue. Let's not take that for granted. It's time that we get back to those we rely on so steadily. So whether it's an incentive to recruit or an incentive to retain, I fully support the partial tax exemption as presented. Ensuring the safety of our community is the common top priority of the Board of Education, Pittsford Fire Department, Pittsford Volunteer Ambulance, and our neighboring departments. I have a deep respect for the sacrifices that they make in ensuring our safety. They and their families deserve this small compensation for their devout service.
So we do need to announce that, Ted, go ahead.
Yeah. As a 36-year volunteer member of the fire department, I'm going to recuse myself from voting on this, but I do fully support it. Thank you.
And similarly, I have to recuse myself, and I don't like to do that, but I do have a personal conflict of interest in that my husband's company provides emergency response technology to fire departments and EMS services. So I also have to recuse myself, and I am in support of this. So with that, I need to have a motion again because it really wasn't Mike's purview to take the motion. So I will take the motion. Thanks, Renee. Thanks, Robin. Any further questions?
Just a comment. Sarah, I could not agree with you more, and I just want to say thank you for taking that time to write that. I think you hit every point very eloquently, and you're very passionate about it, and I'm grateful for that, and I'm, again, grateful for all the support our volunteers offer us and our students in our community, so thank you.
Okay. Those that can vote, all in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
We thank you all that are here for your service. Thank you. We're at the last part of our agenda for the night, and I want to close with sharing some of the survey results, actually basically all the survey results from our optional masking survey. So I'm going to take you through some of the data pieces, but first I want to just kind of start with framing so we're on the same page what's happening right now. Not included in here is something that I have shared with the board, and it's on our website, is a letter that our Monroe County Superintendent has sent to the governor, again, asking for this exit. February 10th, which is that tomorrow or Thursday? It's Thursday. Thursday, the Public Health and Health Planning Council is scheduled to meet. That's the group that creates policy for New York State Department of Health. In their meeting, they have on the agenda to discuss the masking mandate and whether or not that's going to be extended, or if it's going to be, or whatever announcement's going to be had around the mask mandate and mask optional. The other thing that's happening right now, or today, was that the governor did meet with a stakeholder group of superintendents and board members and I believe teachers as well. It was about a 45-minute meeting. She did not tip her hat one way or the other, which way she was going to go. So I think she did allude to the fact that we're coming out of this and there's going to be a time, but she did not give a time or an inclination during that call of what the announcement would be on the 10th. I'm also hearing that she may be making an announcement tomorrow ahead of the 10th. So I created these slides 2 days ago, and it's changed a little bit. So there may be an announcement from the governor tomorrow. The latest the announcement would be on February 10th, after the Public Health and Health Planning Council meets. Currently, the extension expires on February 22nd for her mask mandate for schools. So not sure where that's going to go. That may be decided in advance on February 10th or tomorrow. So you have that path. Then you have another path, which is the March 2nd date where the state's ruling of masking being unconstitutional is being challenged. Everything has to be done March 2nd. And so sometime March 2nd or after, the court's going to rule about the constitutionality of masking. I added these last two slides, the last 2 days. Other dates, March 7th is the date that New Jersey will no longer mandate masks, which will then mean that the masking policies will go to individual boards of educations in their schools across New Jersey. Yesterday, I shouldn't have put New Jersey in there. So yesterday, really, Delaware and Connecticut also announced local school decision for masking. So we're seeing a theme here where the majority of states are leaning towards making this a local decision. So we have our own work at the state level to figure out. And you see it's going to be somewhere between February 10th and February 22nd where we'll have some message from the governor, and I believe it could be actually as early as tomorrow around the direction this is heading. So the good news, right? So I think the good news is the mindset is that we're going from pandemic to endemic, and that the mindset is that in treating this like an endemic, we have to think about all of the mitigation strategies we've put into place for 2 years, including masking. And so that's the mindset that I feel has been changing locally and at the state level. So what are we doing? We were among the first to survey parents and guardians and staff in our area. Since we sent out our survey, I would also note that I had calls from several different districts in different areas within the state relative to our survey, sent them our survey questions, and we'll be sharing results with them as well. So January 27th, I pulled together presidents of our Teachers Association, our Administrators Association, our Parent Association, along with our CIO, our Director of Communications, and actually Stephanie right there, our teacher leader, and Dwayne, you were both there. A lot of people here were part of that committee. The reason we pulled together a committee on January 27th was because of what happened on January 24th, which led to January 25th, which was the day that there was an appeal in the courts. With the unknown if it was going to be a stay or not, we wanted to be prepared for whatever that ruling was, which we then found out is following the previous slide. So the two biggest questions that we wanted answers from our community was, do you support a mask optional policy in our schools if the mandate is removed? And then secondly, what conditions must exist for you to support a mask optional policy, which includes the option, we can't support this for any reason. So what you're going to see shortly is people that that want a mask optional policy, as long as certain conditions exist and certain supports are given. So why did we do the survey? We've been living with mask mandate for over 2 years. I believe it's been 3 school years where we've had masks on. And the problem with doing anything for 3 school years is going through the undoing of a process. So with masking, it's tough to say we're just going to flip a switch and tomorrow there's going to be no masking. This topic has so much emotion in it. There's emotions on so many different sides, actually on 3 sides. And there's also fear. I think that there's fear from people about what's going to happen when we drop the masks. There's going to be fear from people that if we don't drop the masks, then we're giving up our freedom, and we're not taking care of our kids mentally and emotionally. And right now we're in this weird position where we're kind of in a divide. So part of my my thinking around the survey was also to be able to say, let's start talking about it. Let's prepare for all different options and get it in people's minds that we're not going to be in masks forever. When we talk about when we talked about how to respond to trauma, when we talked about active shooters, we went through training that says your body won't go where your mind hasn't gone. And so we train people to go through to start thinking about how would you respond if. Part of the survey was getting people used to that idea that we're not going to be in masks forever. We're not going to be in masks this entire year, but we need to get our minds set on what that would look like and what that would feel like. That's part of a change process, especially being in this for so long. We also wanted to see what stakeholders were thinking to better assist with the transition when this becomes a local decision. So I've heard the benefit that I have is I hear from everyone. So I hear from every possible thing that you can imagine, and many of you have been the recipients of some of my forwards. One of the things, regardless of where we land on this, is that we need to get over the concept of making judgments about people. We need to get over we need to get to a point where we can address mask shaming with or without masks. We need to get to a point where we're not vaccination shaming with or without vaccinations. We also have to think, so when I say this isn't flipping a switch, that means that I'm going to need support from the people that are here in creating that. It may be some part of our code of conduct in the next week to bring in that concept of mask shaming. We also are a community, and so I'm going to go back to flipping a switch. We can't flip a switch and say tomorrow we're mask optional. because I know for a fact, if we were mask optional, we would have several people that we would have to find a plan for. So those are the things that we're working through and will be working through relative to immunocompromised underlying conditions. We have a lot to consider. That won't take months to do, but we have a lot to consider, and it's not me that just needs to be the one thinking about how to do that. We also have staffing implications, including buses, bus drivers. We have to think about whatever we do, how we're still able to bring in substitute teachers, retired teachers, et cetera. So I want to just pause for a second and just say it's really nice to be able to talk about this. We haven't been able to do this. So we're at that point now where it's time to talk about it. And we have plans on how we're going to do that, which I'll share in a minute after I turn it over to Dr. Kimmer. We did get lots of questions, not lots, we got a handful of questions about the survey. This is a lot on the slide, so Dr. Kimmer is just going to talk to this slide for a minute.
Thank you, Superintendent Pirro. And I just want to go over a few slides about response rates and who we canvassed and just a little bit about the process, and then I'll turn it back over to the superintendent. So there is a lot of writing here on the screen. Hopefully you can see from the rear of the room, depending on where you're sitting, and the board, of course, has it in their packet. There's 3 chunks here for the parents and the guardian response rate, participation rate. When we push the button on these surveys in my office, we have a choice in who we can send it to. In Infinite Campus, I might be getting a little bit into the weeds, but we have a contact 1 and 2, which could be a mom or dad or a dad or mom, depending on how that family was registered. The committee that Mike referenced earlier felt very passionate that we wanted to reach as many moms and dads in the household as possible so that we can hear their voice. This was a temperature check. This was a survey for perception. We also reached out to moms and dads outside the home. We call that contact 4 in Infinite Campus. So we cast the net very wide, and we reached out with individual unique links to almost 11,000 parent guardians in the school district. Of those 11,000, give or take, there's about 5,500 that responded for about a 52% response rate. Again, this wasn't a vote. This was simply a perception survey. So then when you break it down into that middle paragraph that I wrote on the slide here, we have about 5,600 students, as you heard in my presentation from enrollment projections a couple weeks ago. To slice this and filter it a little bit differently, we heard from 4,400, or on behalf of 4,400 unique students. At least one parent responded on behalf of that child. That equals 78% of students represented, at least spoken for, feedback provided as a response rate for this survey. There were some questions that Mike spoke of a few minutes ago about parents thinking that there were a lot of multiple responses per family when you cast the net that wide. Of the 4,400 unique students, only 1,000 or so, maybe 1,100 of those had mom and dad respond to the survey. So there was a lot of unique individual responses, one per child per family, that we were able to tabulate to show you some of the results you're going to see. And for those families that both responded, mom and dad, 85% of them agreed. So it was easy to collapse their answers together, if that makes sense. Staff. We have about 1,300 staff. That number might seem a little higher than when our Assistant Superintendent Sean Clark reported during his budget presentation earlier today. But that would include BOCES itinerant staff, long-term subs, all staff. And from that number, we had 957 respond for a 75% response rate, which is pretty strong. Before I turn it back over to the superintendent, just the first question asked if PCSD is tasked with making the local decision about masking. Simply yes or no, would you support a mask optional policy? Parent and guardians responded 56% yes and 44% no for that yes or no question. Similarly, staff responses, same question, 62% yes for staff and 38% said no when asked that same question if they would support a mask optional policy. I'll turn it back over to Mike, who'll dig a little bit into the details.
So, digging deeper, the second question asked for what conditions must exist for you to consider supporting a mask optional policy. So in this area, this is where we really tried to get to the crux of where people where their minds were relative to feeling comfortable with this. So 20% said, no matter what, I'm good right now. I'm not answering any more of this question. 11% said, I will not support mask optional this year. And then 69% said, I would consider supporting if one or more conditions exist. So when you look at it from this lens, you get to about 89% of those that were surveyed feel that they could support it if something were happening, if that makes sense. Does that make sense out here?
So Mike, if you could just give a couple of examples.
I'm going
of
to.
what,
I'm going to
okay.
dig right into this next. That was a perfect lead-in, I think. So here we go. So 69% people said they could support with one or more conditions, and these are the conditions that they listed. Lower county infection rate, weather, fewer hospitalization, access to home test kits, lower infection rate here at school, access to district-based testing, access to free KN95 masks, and then other, which you'll hear some other comments from. So again, when we gave the survey, what we're trying to do is to take a position that's divided and look at how we can bring in all stakeholder feedback to make that closer, so as a unit we can go through that change process together. So looking at these areas in gold, one of the things that we're doing right now, so 6% wanted access to KN95 masks. That's what we're looking into right now. Access to district-based testing, things that we can certainly continue. Lower infection rates, which is what we're seeing right now, along with fewer hospitalizations. It's interesting. So it's everything in the survey is a point in time, and so even since the time of the survey, what we're seeing are the numbers going in the right direction. Here's just some other responses in the area where people shared their input. 156 informed us to look to the CDC or the medical community. So, and I will share with the board, and you're all aware that this is ongoing with us, and so every Tuesday, at least, we are checking in with the medical community. As early as today, one of the indicators that I heard from our medical community is everything is going in the perfect direction to set up for a mask optional type policy. You can see the rest of the comments. It's tough when you have 5,500 people take the survey and try to quantify these, but these are what was on people's minds for what it's worth, which is a lot, because even one comment is important to one person. So for staff, we have 76% of our staff that said that they would support a mask optional policy with one or more of the conditions, along with 16%. So we're at 93% if we're able to work together. So thinking about working together with our community and working together with our staff, not going with flip a light switch, but having a plan where people feel comfortable moving together, moving forward together once we have the okay to do that. So staff responses, again, very similar to the parent responses. You can see them right there. Nothing earth-shattering. But these are the little things, I think, that when we probed, the things that it would take to help people feel okay with transitioning after 3 school years of masking. Other staff responses. Again, numbers were minimal. Parents and guardians, if there's a mask optional policy, would your child need any of the following accommodations? 65% no accommodations, and 23% access to masks. So we're looking at close to 90% of people that we would be able to accommodate with their children in a very simple way. 8% an alternative learning model. Other responses from parents? Again, these numbers are tough to quantify out of over 5,000 surveys. Staff responses, 57% no accommodation needed, 35% access to masks. That brings us to 92%, again, very similar to parents. 3% would need additional accommodations, and 5% are other. Other staff responses. And now we get into our next step. So our next, how do I say this? I don't see a time when the governor is not going to say masking is not optional. How's that? So the governor, at some point the governor is going to say there is going to be a mask optional policy. I would be absolutely floored and shocked if that doesn't happen. So, and again, we'll hear more about that tomorrow. So, given that, that brings us to the right side, which means that at some point soon, I believe, the Board of Education will need to make a decision relative to what that ruling means locally for being mask optional. So internally, we are meeting with the district planning team next week. Again, the district planning team has all of our internal stakeholders represented. It has a community member without children, community member with children, and PT and parents are also on the committee. So this is our planning team, the same team that any major initiative goes through. And we're going to talk about how we specifically are transitioning out of masking. What can we offer, like you saw in the survey, as far as mitigation strategies. And then we need a process for identifying specific staff and students that need additional accommodations, because those are real. So we're going to need to figure out who those people are, what that plan would look like, and move forward. And then we also parallel, which is already happening, process our survey results and local data with regards to metrics that are needed for local support. And I believe we have that. And then effective strategies that we can use for immunocompromised. So when we meet with those smaller percent of students and staff that are indeed immunocompromised, what is it that we can do to provide a safe environment for them? At the beginning, I shared that I'm going to be as transparent as I possibly can with our data and around this topic. And I'm going to probably say something that's unpopular for a lot of people that are in the audience right now. But it's my reality, is that this week has been a real tough week for several other people, for teachers, for some teachers, for some kids, for all administrators, as we approach how we're going to handle different things that are on social media. So this is why I'm asking for your support. I'm asking for your support out here. So let's just take away judgment, and let's just talk about facts for a second. When the No Mask Monday thing happened on social media, my inbox in my phone was flooded from parents not sure if they could take their kids to school yet because of whatever reason, immunocompromised, or they have someone visiting their house or a grandparent at home. And it caused a lot of internal turmoil. It caused a lot of stress, administrators trying to figure out what are we going to do when kids show up with no masks, and how do we handle that. It was a lot on Monday, and it came and went. And then Tuesday came, and Tuesday I received a call from the sheriff's office because a community member had called in reports of disruption in our parking lots. I had to respond to parents whose kids were in class that were scared when they heard the horns beeping. People didn't have any heads up of what was happening, and they were worried. So here's our reality, and I say this very respectfully to everyone that's out here. I say it very respectfully to our board. We have 6,000 unique kids in our school. We have 6,000 unique families in our school. Like I said before, I get to see all of it. I have to work with all of it, and I love working with all of it. But I also have to say to a parent, and I have to work with an 8th grader who is autistic, who is scared when they're seeing and hearing a commotion out in the parking lot. I have to respond to the police who ask me if we need to do anything further. It's just my reality. And the bottom line is, and here's what hits me actually personally, along with professionally, is that we're a community, and you're wonderful, you're amazing, and you have a belief, and your belief makes sense. We also have different beliefs within 6,000 families, and our job is to find a way to go from point A to point B, which would mean getting these off and moving to endemic together. Because what we can't, I shouldn't say can't, because we may do it again. I'm hoping not. But what I'm hoping is that we can go through a process where your support and others' support and minds working together can get us to a good place to get out of this. Because we have to get out, we will get out, and we're preparing for that. We're planning for that. So with that, I'll ask the board if there's any questions before I have a seat and close this part.
Does anyone have questions? I just want to make a comment, Mike. Obviously, we have also received a lot of comments as well. And we all want to see an end to this, and we would like to move toward an endemic and treating it that way. I hope that in that, we can all have civility. I hope. Because it really feels as though there are times where that's been lost, and I really hope that we have civility, because some of the responses that we get are not very kind. And it's okay if that's how you feel, and I understand passion and all of that. But we are advocating on the community's behalf, and we want a smooth transition into an endemic situation. So I just want to say that. We have a ton of public comment tonight. And I've also received some feedback about public comment, and I just need to set the parameters here. Public comment is a privilege of the floor. That's exactly what it is. In the board meetings, according to open meetings laws, we do not have to have a public comment. I say that often, but I say it out of respect to say we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you. That said, a lot of the public comment this evening, there's a lot of repetitiveness. And so what I'd like to do is offer those of you who have come here live, and I have a lot of cards here. we'll start with these. I think 45 minutes is fair, giving each one of you 3 minutes to speak. And I think there are some duplications from people who wrote in with submissions and people who also wrote on a card, if I'm not mistaken. So I've tried to go through those as I'm sitting here. So why don't I start with...
Also, do you want to share how many write-ins we have?
Yes, I can share how many write-ins we have and try to get to some of those as well. But we have, trying to lick my finger, but I can't do that very well. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we have 10 write-ins, and then we have some of the duplicates that those of you who are here tonight. So, and then I also want to make mention that we offer write-in submissions. Many other districts do not do that. We, again, want to hear from you. So of the write-in submissions that don't get read, the entire board does read them, and we take them under advisement. We had 4 write-in submissions, Deb, correct me if I'm wrong, after the 12 noon deadline today. So we have a 12 noon deadline to get your write-in submissions the day of our board meeting. So, I don't think I have to read the rules of engagement. I just want you to respect that if you are taking privilege of the floor, it's 3 minutes. We will be keeping the time, and we're keeping the time to 3 minutes. You need to be a resident. And you also need to be a resident. I need to highlight that. And when I call you to the podium, if you could please state your name and address, that would be very helpful to us. Deb has to make a note of that.
Amy, before we get started, I think we skipped over the consent agenda.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
And old business, new business. Okay. A motion to accept the consent agenda. Thanks, Renee. Thanks, Pete. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Old business. New business. Thank you, Jeff. Keeping me in line. So we've already gone through the public comment, and I am going to start with Meredith Graham.
Good evening. Thank you so much for taking my comment. First, I'd just like to thank the board, and I'd also like to thank the administrators and the teachers who have been working tirelessly through this. I think that we all have a lot of respect for our teachers, and I would like to just ask that the students out there continue to respect our teachers, because if parents are telling their students to come to school and not respect the rules and the teachers, unfortunately, that's going to end up a bad thing for both the teacher and the parent at some point. I also would like to say that none of this is easy, and I appreciate you going through all of the different pieces, asking for input. I feel strongly that there are 3 things that allow us to take our masks off, according to the epidemiologists. One is vaccination rates. One is case load, in terms of if the hospitals are full or nearly there. And the other is transmission rate. And I think that knowing those things and knowing where we are with respect to each of those allows us to make a decision based on science and not emotion, which I think is really important, because it seems like there's a lot of emotion around this. So I just want to say thank you, and that I appreciate the decorum. Thanks.
Thanks, Meredith.
Thank you, Meredith. And if I could just add, so right now, I believe we have 4 schools today with 0 cases. We have Sutherland that is our naughty school right now with 6 cases, and then we have 4 and something like 2. So our numbers inside are really low. Yeah, our numbers, wow. Our numbers inside are really low. In speaking with Dr. Mendoza today, the hospital rates are really improving dramatically, and the vaccination rate in our community is the highest in Monroe County. So our environment is in a good position to transition. I think that a lot of so I feel uncomfortable sharing some things because obviously I'm not speaking for doctors and I'm not a physician, but I will share that the physicians that I've spoken with aren't feeling that the needle on vaccination is going to move much either way for a while. So, including the fact that there may not be a correlation with mask optional increasing vaccination or decreasing vaccination rates. That we are where we are right now, and we're. But in having said that, the medical opinion in our schools is certainly a consideration for us, and I believe that what I heard today from our local medical, from our county health, is that our conditions are really pretty good right now, and the next step is for the governor to act on whatever she needs to act on, and then our job is to be smart and planful for that transition, so we're ready for it.
Deb, I just want to add that Meredith's address is 21 Northfield Gate. I failed to mention that. Okay, Laura Jean Dykeman.
Hi there. How's everybody?
How
Holding
are
up. So there have been some parents that have gotten together who believe
Laura
in
Jean,
advocating
if you could just
for the,
mention your address.
Oh, yeah, 19 Rippingdale
Thank
Road.
you.
Some parents that have gotten together that are advocating for the children of this community for masks to be optional. We're not anti-mask, we are for mask optional, which is not in the least bit a crazy idea. As of now, there are 46 states that have now adopted that policy. 46 states are now optional masking. Yesterday, a caravan to support this advocacy drove past a few of the schools, and some of the people in their cars beeped their horns, and some had American flags flying on their cars. It came to my attention last night that students were showing parents screenshots of messages that kids were sending on social media regarding the caravan, which is to be expected. I saw some of them with my own eyes, and I was, quite frankly, really appalled. Our high school students, and actually some teachers, were not only berating the parents, but also expressing their hatred for the American flag, which kind of, I'm like literally about to cry, because this American flag stands for freedom, and freedom should never be mocked. Perhaps our district needs to use some of our DEI money and have an assembly for our students so they can understand what the word freedom means and what the American flag represents. Maybe some veterans in our community can come in and talk to our students and our staff about what they've endured to fight for that freedom. Or we could invite some in the community who have immigrated from China or Cuba to talk about life under tyranny. And if you need names, I have two awesome people that can come in and talk. Additionally, maybe some more of that DEI money should be used on teaching kids not to bully others who may have a different opinion on bodily autonomy. Our district celebrates the right to choose gender and sexuality, but somehow it seems to tolerate and encourage harassment of students' and families' health choices. The ignorance on display seen through these social media posts was embarrassing for our district, and we should not be proud. Their actions certainly didn't represent the high intelligence of students and teachers that our district has always boasted about over decades. I think we have work to do. Thank you.
I have to hand.
Yeah.
So if I could just comment on the comment. 100% unacceptable to have a hatred over our flag. Agree 100% with you that social media is despicable, period. And we do have veterans that do come in and speak to our classes. And we have several ceremonies with our veterans. And so, you know, I don't want to go into what people I can't be, because I can, you'll see it in my diary sometime, all the different posts that are out there that come in front of me. People just need to be civil and be respectful on social media, period. If we could do that, we could conquer anything in this district. Because if I wanted to, I can also share some gestures that were certainly made during the parade by some people that people saw that weren't a good representation, that maybe many of you aren't even aware of. It was a tough thing for our school to go through. It was a disruption. How people responded to that, the information you shared with me, I haven't seen. But if people are responding to that saying, I hate the American flag, I have an issue with that. But it's also a symptom. It's a symptom of us not being able to get through differing opinions together. This is an opportunity for us to do it. It's an opportunity for us to lead the way in a positive change together. Because it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
The kids do feel stifled, Mike, to be able to express those opinions in school. They do.
Thank you.
Okay. Scott Georger.
Thank you. Scott Georger, 70 Woodland Road. And let me just say that it's not easy for me to come up here and stand in front of you. I've done it several times in the past. I've even written letters trying to talk about the disappointment that I had with the lack of education that my children received from your schools, that masks and isolation do not stop COVID, and that COVID deaths were exaggerated. I asked for schools to be back to normal, and nothing that I said in those letters or when I've spoken to you was inaccurate, and I'm still asking for this. However, I do have a problem to begin with the fact that you denied parents the opportunity to attend last meeting. Your website gave two incredibly weak reasons. The first was lateness in receiving the masking decision from the state. I received the news by 7:30. Your meetings are always later than that. The second was confusion over rules that the state education department was instructing school districts to follow. There was no confusion about this. You were just going to do whatever the state instructs you to do. You had people attend the meeting that were allowed to address the board. Therefore, it wasn't a remote meeting. I'm not sure that that's honesty. This was a change in your power structure. It's a censorship of parents and the inability to face parents. We as parents, we as people, have a basic constitutional right to free speech, which means to address the board. Now, I've heard tonight that I'm not allowed to do this, and I appreciate you allowing me to do this. But as a governmental body, basic principles of democracy must be followed. When power is taken, power is not given back, and it becomes easier and easier to continue to abuse this power, and we've seen this in our governors, both current and past. Masks have not worked in the school, and they will not work in the future. One of your teachers in September made some very, very troubling misinformation about masks. He presented data that flu rates were down last year and deducted masks work to stop a virus. In December, we learned that the main test for COVID, the PCR test, was stopped because it was flawed and couldn't differentiate between illnesses, flu and COVID. So COVID rates were high and flu rates were low because everything was counted as COVID. And your students and your teacher saw flu rates down, so he told impressionable students looking for knowledge this level of inaccuracy. Teachers should educate our future doers, thinkers, and leaders on facts and not on flawed deductions or hysteria. And let me just finally say, in December, according to New York State, we broke a record for flu cases. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Scott, there's one thing that I do need to clarify. As I said, I was just pointing out what the law states. No, we're not having a conversation. I'm just telling you that I'm not exercising authority. We have offered more than most districts in terms of write-in submissions for public comment when we haven't been able to meet. We still do that. And we offer public comment for people who are here. So by saying that we're not listening, we're listening. And that's not including all of the other emails that we receive in between. And by and large, I review every one of those. Everyone at this board table sees anything that I get through email. So anytime you want to meet with me, I make it a priority to meet with you. If you'd like to have coffee with me, I've already extended that offer to many people who have written to me, and I've had people not respond to that offer. So that is an offer. That's a true offer. Okay. Susan Gould.
Hi, Susan Gould, 35 Carriage Court. I kind of debated what to say today because I was up until 2 with my mind going all over, but I decided to go with timelines and numbers since those are what I'm usually pretty good at. And I'm going to talk, I just really wanted to talk a little bit about the funding that came from the federal government and really just kind of ask if we can give it back. And I'll get to that. So basically, there were 3 pockets of money that I could tell that Pittsford got was, and that totaled $6.8 million out of about, sorry, I'm too short for this, out of approximately 9 to 13 billion, depending on which source you look at, that the New York State got. That was less than 1%, which is pretty typical of what Pittsford gets in general from the state. And the timeline for that was in March 2020, Congress passed the CARES Act, so that gave a pocket of money. And then December 2020, they passed the CRRSA Act, which was the Educational Stabilization Fund. And then March 2021, they passed the ARP, or ESSER, Part 3, I guess. Anyway, all of these were passed. And then in June, the government added all the rules. And the rules were what you need to do in order to, quote unquote, get these funds, of which you partially already got. And that was to develop strategies and implement public health protocols, including, to the greatest extent practicable, policies in line with guidance from the CDC. LEAs must include how it will maintain the health and safety of students, educators, other staff in the schools. Policies it adopted regarding each of the CDC safety recommendations, including universal and correct wearing of masks, modifying facilities, etc. I'll skip to most of that. It also said that periodically, but not less than every 6 months, it must review its plan as appropriate. So I know you were able to submit the original plan as part of the initial thing, but it also says that you're due to review this plan in 6 months. So if you submit it in August, September, October, November, December, January, February, we're at the 6-month mark. So should we not have a review? And with that review, it said public comments. I just want to close with, the government basically gave you the money, then months later gave you the rules. Here's what I propose. Give it back. We managed quite well without the blood money before. We'll manage well without it. Nowhere does it say you have to give the money back. What other contracts work this way? And if they want it back, give it to them. Wash your hands of these tyrannical requirements, especially the mask mandates. And I just want to end with, there have been 770 children deaths between the ages of 0 and 17. That's 0.08 of 1%. Cases reported to date are 74 million. That's 0.001 of 1%. That means your child has a 0.001% chance of dying. There's a greater chance of dying from drowning, vehicle accidents, homicide, cancer, cardiovascular disease, and suffocation. I'm not sure what Governor Hochul plans, but this is not about the science. It's about control. It's time we allow families to make the decisions that are best for them. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Eric Kuhlman? Eric Kuhlman?
Thank you. Eric Kuhlman, 118 Wood Green Drive. Thank you for all your efforts. Appreciate it. Appreciate the sincerity of what you're all dealing with. These are pre-written notes, so I'll go with it even though there's a lot transpired tonight. With new developments on the effectiveness of mask mandates, I encourage the board members to stand up and immediately give families back the choice. The time is now. Each day provides more research and data to support the elimination of these mandates. The urgency of normal, The Atlantic, New York Times, Johns Hopkins have all pointed to the path forward for our children in schools. And I think this is important for our community to know, even though we covered some of the developments here. I recognize that making masks optional at schools brings concerns. We just talked about it. How do we protect those that are most vulnerable or those that are simply afraid? A solution is to educate our community on the effectiveness of one-way masking with quality masks, remind those that are afraid that the virus has evolved and is ultimately less threatening. Some children will need to wear masks and advised by their doctors. Others may choose to wear a mask for personal sense of security, and that is okay. Most importantly, as we navigate our path forward, we must protect our children from potential bullying and harassment for their choice whether to wear a mask. And thank you to Principal Jacobs, Sophia, and Superintendent Perro for bringing up these issues. So we need to be clear that no form of bullying or discrimination from students, faculty, or staff will be tolerated. I propose that medical identity, that's medical identity, be added to the anti-bullying curriculum at our schools. The New York State Dignity for All Students Act has no mention of medical status or medical privacy. By proposing language that covers this type of protection, the board can affect change statewide and be a leader. This language would apply to all medical statuses. Immunity status should remain private. When vaccines became available to school-age children, students were curious about who was vaccinated and who was not. In some cases, children were excited to be vaccinated, which led to vax bragging, and in some cases turned to vax shaming. In November, I brought this to the superintendent's attention, as well as the principals of our kids' schools. I was worried that this issue could snowball and even reach the elementary age children in the district, and it did. The Pittsford community has always stood for acceptance, equality, and inclusivity. Why should this be any different? Mask mandates should end today. I'm asking the board to be a leader in Monroe County to give our children back their smiles. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Lori Petrilli.
Can I remove this? Or do you want it on?
I don't even know anymore.
All right.
You're far enough away if you want to, if it's easier to read. You can
Okay.
do that.
So thanks for letting me speak. My name is Lori Petrilli. I'm at 17 Countryside Road. Per our governor, New York's weekly COVID-19 cases plunged last week by 43% and are expected to continue to decline. The CDC also recently published a statement that cloth masks are ineffective. From an article published by the CDC in 2020, they performed a study which showed that 85% of those who contracted COVID-19 during July of 2020, which was the height of the pandemic, were actually mask wearers. In a mask efficacy study article taken from the National Institute of Health, it stated the filtration efficiency of the filter of materials was good, over 95% for particles that were above 5 microns in diameter. Okay, so think asbestos here. But great variation of efficient filtration existed for smaller particles. Coronavirus is 0.125 microns. Therefore, cloth, half masks, and surgical masks would not protect you from the coronavirus. The International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health published an article in April 2021. This study was based on prolonged periods of mask wearing. Our students meet this criteria as they are masking 7 hours a day, 35 hours per week in school, and that is approximately 700 hours of mask wearing our students have clocked in this year so far, just this school year. The following are some of the harmful effects identified in this article: difficulty breathing, increase in anxiety, headaches and dizziness, my daughter for sure, acne, itching, and skin lesions on the face. I've seen a lot of photographs lately of this. Decrease in empathy perception and social emotional understanding. Delays and failures in phonological reading development and speech development, and decrease in cardiopulmonary capacity. Think of all our student athletes. Can you imagine experiencing some of these harmful effects of mask wearing while you are a student athlete, I have two, running indoor track, playing indoor basketball, and playing indoor soccer, etc., when children ages 6 to 18 can have a maximum heart rate as high as 215 beats per minute? In summary, I am asking each of you, as a parent and as a representative voice for our children, to follow the science and provide mask choice for our children immediately. Our children's voices need to be heard. They have not been. Our children have rights, and they are suffering, and you all here tonight have a moral obligation to stand up for our students. It's been 2 years, over 1,000 hours of our children being masked at school since the pandemic began. It is time to free our children's smiles. In light of Black History Month, I would like to end with a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. that I hope resonates with all of you tonight. One has not only a legal but a moral responsibility to obey just laws. Conversely, one also has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. I hope you will all do just that. Thank you.
David Mensch. David Mensch.
Do you guys mind if I take this off?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Drives me crazy. Dave Mensch, 35 Deer Creek. This is a mask that they've been making us wear for 2 years. Who wants to help me go do an asbestos job? Let me pass it around. Somebody mentioned the particle size of asbestos. 0.7 microns. Pulled it right off the website, between 0.7 and 0.9. New York State says you can't wear that little blue mask to mitigate asbestos. On another page, how to use an N95 mask. N95 masks do not protect you against chemical vapors, gases, carbon monoxide, gasoline, asbestos, lead, or low oxygen environments. Doesn't work for asbestos. Someone else said it just a second ago. Particle size. Show it to the camera. There's your particle size. Right here is asbestos. 7 to 10 microns. Way down here, this little dot you can't see is the coronavirus. Now, many people might say that it travels on water particles, right? Well, maybe the water particles. Go outside with your N95 mask and breathe. If you can't see your breath coming out of your mask, then it works. You can go do a test tonight. What is it, 30 degrees out? We can check it out. So the efficiency just isn't there. So that's the science part. Now let's flip over to what a lot of us have been addressing for the last couple of years, and that's the mental health component. We all say that we want to take care of our children. We want to take care of our children physically. We want to take care of our children mentally. Part of that is what we've already discussed, is being able to see children, their faces, how they learn, especially early development. I have teenagers. I have kids that have graduated. They have the mental capacity to work out not being able to read someone's face. We had a young lady here earlier who had no idea where the voice was coming from when somebody was complimenting her, right? That's just a small piece of the social cues that we look for. And this article I have here is about youth attempted suicide, and the fact that that number has skyrocketed, 40%. And you all know that the increase also is in mental health. So part of that component is this visual component. Unmasking the children helps with social emotional learning at a higher degree. And anybody here that works with the little kids, you know dang well that's true. We sit over here with a baby, and what do people do with a baby when they pay attention to a baby and talk to a baby? Pitch of your voice goes up, your facial expressions open up, and you wait for the child to smile. These children don't see that. So you tell me, what is the effect? Look at the graph. Look at the effects of our own district. Somebody posted it somewhere. It was like a 20% decrease in excellence.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it looks like I have two people that are maybe here together, the Gelbs. Are the Gelbs here? Do you mind coming up and presenting together, please?
Can we both read?
You can both read. Is it the same message?
It's a little different. Same idea. We're both speaking about our son. My name is Jen Gelb, 10 Trotters Field Run. I'm coming at this as a little bit more of a personal approach with a son with special needs. I'm going to try to get through this. I'm a parent of a 4th grader at Menon Center Elementary School and a 6th grader at Calkins Road Middle School who is in the 811 special education program. My son Aaron has autism, ADHD, and severe anxiety. Since his start in the Pittsford Central School District back in kindergarten, he has received special education services, including special setting, PT, OT, and speech and language support. These services, along with our constant work at home and additional outside services, have helped him grow tremendously over the years. We are blown away and so incredibly proud of his achievements, one being winning Pittsford Pride last year. Thank you. One crucial life skill that he has struggled with and has had to learn over the years is how to read facial expressions and communicate with others. Throughout his years at Jefferson Road, he worked on these skills daily. He would have to study faces on the computer, on paper, and in books, and try to apply them in real-life settings. For a child with autism, being able to read social cues, facial expressions, and act accordingly is extremely difficult under normal circumstances. Now imagine having to do this for the past 2 years without being able to see any faces at all. This fall, Aaron started 6th grade at Calkins Road Middle School. It was a totally new environment with lots of adjustments that are more difficult for him than his typical peers. He has never seen his teachers or classmates' faces. This has made connecting with peers and the ability to form friendships extremely difficult and virtually impossible. After so many years of growth, we are now seeing regression, increased anxiety, and distress. Over the past 2 weeks, Aaron has been reprimanded and often removed from social studies and science classes. He was even stopped in the hallway outside of his science class this Monday for not having his mask on over his nose. For Aaron, this is the only way that he can tolerate the mask on his face. Along with his autism comes hypersensitivities, lots of sensory seeking, and sensory overload. Sensory overload can feel like extreme anxiety and can make communicating very difficult and lead to shutting down or meltdowns. This is where we are currently at and how Aaron feels when he is forced to put the mask on over his nose. This masking policy is failing him and doing more harm than it is good. As of yesterday, New Jersey, Connecticut, Colorado, Delaware, and even Oregon have been added to the list of states that do not have mask mandates any longer. I strongly request that Pittsford Central School District take the lead and fight for our kids and support mask choice. Not one size fits all. 2 years is long enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
May I have a chance?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Robert Gelb, 10 Trotters Field Run. A little similar, but kind of different spin. My name is Robert Gelb. I am the father of a 4th grader at Menace Center and a 6th grader at Calkins Road Middle School. While I didn't grow up in Pittsford, I quickly shared the pride in living in this community, mainly because of the school district. You led in a way to get our kids back into the schools when other communities struggled. But to me, my children are the most important things in my life. When my children leave my house, when my children leave the house for school, parents like myself trust our children are in good hands. Aaron is our 6th grader who is diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, and he's an amazing success story as a student who went through Jefferson Road Elementary. While my wife and I have always spoke highly of all the teachers there, including his good friend Mr. Clark, Aaron would hit roadblocks in different situations. It was a collaboration the teachers had with my wife and I that often helped Aaron and his teachers learn methods on how to navigate challenging times. For a child that didn't learn social cues second nature, like so many children, the work he had to do throughout the day in all social surroundings proved detrimental. Thankfully, he learned some of these skills pre-pandemic, but continues to need reinforcement. I know my child would not have had the same success if he had only been working with masks all the time. Teachers looked to my wife and I over the years because there's nobody that knows Aaron better than us. There's nobody that has worked harder to help him find success, no matter the circumstance. All Aaron's hard work was celebrated by us as parents and teachers to help him find an amazing path to growth. Our successes are not the same as everyone else's because all kids are not the same and shouldn't be treated that way. This is why we have reached a point now, after 2 years, where the mask issue is becoming a problem and causing unnecessary setbacks. Frustration, anxiety, and outbursts have started to creep their way back into his school days. Sensory issues caused by an inability to wear a mask properly all day render the mask's purpose useless. Constant touching of the mask and pulling it down under his nose makes the mask strictly for show. This causes teachers to be put in a situation, in a position I'm sure they don't want to be put in, to spend their time telling kids to pull their masks over their nose. This is a distraction from the time they should be teaching our kids, and this could be avoidable. This educational experience is affecting
is affected with threats of being removed from class if he doesn't wear the mask properly. Threatening a child to miss more school than they've already missed over the past 2 years is not the answer. While there are two sides to the efficacy of the masks in question, it is the parents it is time the parents were consulted on this issue by the district on what can be done to improve our child's experiences in school. It's time for the mandates to end and a choice be put in the hands of the parents.
Thank you, Mr. Gelb.
Okay.
Thank
All right.
you.
I thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you.
Mike Petropoli?
Good evening. Mike Petropoli, 4 Cricket Hill Drive. So last time I want to start by thanking the district's teachers, the staff, the administration, board, and Superintendent Pierre. It's not been an easy 2 years for anybody, and I think we all recognize everybody in this room is here voluntarily because we care about kids at some level. So as has been made evident tonight, I know you've all done your best to balance the interests of a wide variety of stakeholders. So, as the parent of 2 girls who've never known school without masks, I am here in support of a mask optional policy. Again, as Mike pointed out, I think everybody in our community and our society at large is operating with some degree of fear, and that fear often leads to anger and frustration and outrage, frankly. So I think everybody's had to deal with that at some level. I know you all have had to at great length. So the last board meeting, I spoke about the urgency of normal effort as it had launched just the night before. So in those 2 weeks since I last talked about it, over 1,500, approaching 1,500 doctors and clinicians have signed on in support of the original 14 physicians who wrote it. So this toolkit advocates for the immediate removal of ineffective COVID policies. I'm just here to ask that Pittsford adopt policies in line with their recommendations. I encourage residents of Pittsford and parents of students, anybody really interested in getting some objective, non-fear-based data to review the information on the website. It's took a lot of these doctors had quite a bit of backlash from people who were interested for, let's call them, ulterior reasons to discredit them. But these are apolitical, very accredited, very respected physicians. There's a terrific webinar on the website as well. I think the information on there allowed me to, and others I've shared it with, to put fear on the back burner and arm ourselves with data to have a rational discussion about what's best and how we put our kids first. It's been mentioned a lot, how to protect our valued teachers and everybody, vulnerable population. We have so many tools at our disposal, and this paper shows the efficacy of many of them. I think the mask optional approach would allow us to shift the focus from the low quality universal masking, and I think anybody that's spent any time in a school can see that it's low quality universal adoption of low quality masks. This paper does advocate for the efficacy of one-way masking and how much more effective it can be. So just as last year, when Pittsford led the way in in-person instruction, I urge you to lead the way again and allow our kids to begin learning again. Thank you.
Mike, thank you. And I just want to make a comment that thank you for forwarding your materials to the board. We did all have a chance to review them, so I appreciate that.
Sure, if you just Google urgency of normal or go to urgencyofnormal.com, you can find the toolkit. It's a pretty bare bones website, but it has the toolkit, bios of all the physicians and lists of the physicians who've signed on to it. Thank you.
Okay. So We are at the end of public comment for those that are here in person. What we're going to do is post the written submissions online. Is that a possibility?
So Nancy, I think what we can do, look, they're pretty lengthy. And
They're
all-
very lengthy, and we have probably,
We could create a link and put them online, like PDF, and keep them up for a period of time.
perfect. I think that would work. So there are a lot of repetitive, what you've heard tonight in here. There are also people who think differently in here. And there are a couple of other, there's a diversity and equity write-in as well. And I think most of it is pertaining to what we've heard tonight. So that would be great if we could post it online. Again, that's something out of the ordinary that most boards do not do. So I'd like to point that out, and thank you, Nancy, for working with us on that. With that, I would like to have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting. I did the consent agenda. Yeah. May I have a motion to adjourn this meeting? Thank you, Ted. Thanks, Sarah. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, everyone.